Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, depending on when you're watching or listening to this edition, which incidentally is edition 106 or episode 2 of series 3 of Hypnosis Week. And boy, have I got an amazing guest for you today. Now, if you're on the audio podcast, you can't yet you don't know who it is necessarily. If you're on the video, you'll already see at the side of me, depending on which way it chooses to record, the gentleman himself, who you may recognize. Some of you may have seen him between the sort of period of 2003 to 2005 on the Discovery Health Channel UK's television show, The Life Guru, and then from 2005 onwards, was shown at numerous different channels all around the world. He's the author of the 2013 book Beat Anxiety Now and the 2014 book The Science of Thin. You also, if you're in England or watched on the internet as it were, because things get shared there, he appeared on British TV shows such as Popstars The Rivals, which was the forerunner to the X Factor, GMTV, The Right Stuff, and a whole bunch of other shows which we'll talk about, I'm sure, over the next 60 minutes. And his TEDx talk has had over 1.5 million views. Must get a new set of teeth. 7 seconds to change your life. So please welcome to the show, or joining us all the way from Australia, although he's originally from Scotland, the man himself, Alistair, I hope I pronounced this right, Horscroft.
Oh, well, that's the intro. You were age regressing me there, mate, straight off the bat, taking me back in time. Well done.
Look, I want to take you even further back, because there was a time when you weren't the life guru. There was a time when you didn't do hypnosis, NLP, and all that kind of stuff. What was your journey? How did you get into this crazy world?
Hang on. Now that you've introduced me so beautifully, mate, appreciate it. Jonathan or Alex, which one do you prefer?
Whatever you feel best with. I'm Alex by birth, but obviously, media-wise, it was Jonathan. Alex, because that is actually who I am. That's who you're talking to. Yeah.
So I should interview you as well. Have you been interviewed on why you made the name change?
Yeah, I mean, briefly, it's because in the early 90s, I used to go out as Alex Leroy. Because Alex Smith, which is my birth name, doesn't sound wonderful when you're introduced. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Alex Smith. Bit flat. Whereas Leroy, Alex Leroy, you get that.
Yeah.
It gets more applause, which was all well and good until the Sun newspaper and stuff did controversial stories alleging I'd hypnotized women for sex, which was nonsense. I did cash in on that for a few years, but then I got to the point where I'd had enough of it all. So I wanted to distance myself from that stuff. So I needed to change my name. And I thought I'll kind of take the piss a bit as well. So Leroy, L-E-R-O-Y, became Royal, R-O-Y-L-E. And then I thought, Alex Royal, it falls flat. And it was literally just a case of that Jonathan Royal, had the phonetics for more applause. That was literally the only reason.
Oh, good. Well, we can have a good chat later about our mutual likely dislike of the journalistic world.
Okay, yeah, well, that is something I will ask you about.
That'll be a fun rant.
Yeah, look, what got you into this? Because it's not the sort of thing that most people, when they're a child, go, oh, I want to be a hypnotist or a life coach or a therapist. Yeah, I think that's pretty rare that someone, when they're, 4, 5, 6, is thinking that.
Well, look, I think like most of us, or at least most of us have been around for a while, we get so sick to death of telling people our stories that, I just kind of just don't do it anymore. When I go and train, I just go, hi, I'm Alistair, let's get into it. If you want to know more about me, there's a Wikipedia page. That's kind of as far as I go, really. You know what I mean? But I'll honour the question and try and
please, do it because otherwise my bullet points, it'll be me sat here reading out your resume, which is kind of not as interactive as I would have liked it to be.
Right. I'll give it a go. Go. Look, I suppose in short, my parents were, they had a phase in their 30s of being relatively progressive. They were ahead of the curveball, So my old man actually was a military pilot. He was from a council estate in Bristol, and he was one of the youngest guys ever to get his wings. So he was a bit of a legend, really, my old man. You know what I mean? Came from nothing and, did good. My mum, same thing. You know, she was daughter of a miner, not a miner, as in a miner as in digging coal in Wales. And yeah, she did great as well, and she became a nurse. You know, and they both kind of did their thing for a little while, and then I think probably like, you know, mate, you know, I mean, a lot of people who have come from, you know, kind of like those kind of upbringings, and then they try and level up into a different kind of sphere of, you know, I suppose social class, for one of a better way of saying things. I think that took its toll on my old man, you know what I mean? And by the time he was 30, he'd kind of left, you know, the Air Force, and was, you know, trying to find his own way, very skilled craftsman as well. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which way you want to look at it, they got stuck right into the Indian gurus, like hardcore. You know, like my dad was kind of the intellectual gurus like Krishnamurti and that bunch, and my mum went full kind of like Sai Baba guru. Do you know what I mean? And so I was sent to basically a cult from age 9. I was having this like relatively normal existence. I mean, kind of normal. I mean, you know, family life was insane, but you know, relatively normal, up until I was about like 7, 8, 9, and then they joined this weird fucking cult. The next thing I know, I'm kind of basically fostered out to crazy families in London to become a part of this cult. And there's books written about it, you know, a famous book called The Secret Cult.
Hang on, can we just go back? You were fostered out to be part of the cult. How's that work? So you didn't remain with your parents, but yeah, your mum was in the cult.
On and off, they kind of like wanted me so badly to be a part of this cult, but they were living in another part of England, so I had to go and stay with families, and they would kind of fuck off to India, and I'd just be left with kind of like families.
Right, okay.
You know what I mean? And you know, some of the families are pretty cool, some not so cool. Do you know what I mean? But I mean, I was young, and you know, I was like, all I really wanted to do was kind of BMX and, you know, watch The Fall Guy, and you know, all the.
I love that show. Lee Majors.
Yeah, and the next thing I know, I'm flung head first into a fucking cult. So it's a bit strange, really. And I've got a little bit of a, I wouldn't say oppositional, but I've always had a very significant disdain for unearned authority, should we say, you know? So me and the school were like oil and water, really. You know, I mean, I was always naturally a good sportsman, so I kind of, you know, they were kind of a bit fucked with me because I captained every sport, but I was sent out of every lesson. You know what I mean? I was that lad. You know what I mean? So I literally didn't get schooled. I mean, I would work most days in the kitchens, just peeling potatoes. I literally just didn't get a schooling. It's insane. But the school, you know, you meditated in the mornings, meditated in the evenings. You kind of learn, I suppose, what they call now the non-duality way of, you know, of Indian philosophy, the kind of Vedanta philosophy, you know, that a lot of people like, I suppose, Eckhart Tolle and that lot kind of do a version of these days, you know. And yeah, and even back then,
the whole living in the moment, the living in the now.
Yeah, becoming enlightened, living in the moment, you know, all that kind of stuff. And even when I was young, I was like, yeah, man, there's holes in this thing, because all the teachers were madly into it, yeah, but they were kind of violent idiots, you know. Even at age 10, I could see this, you know, I could fucking see the disconnect. Do you know what I mean? So they're trying to get you to meditate, and I'll be like, well, if I meditate, I'm going to become like those assholes. I don't want to become like those assholes, so I'm not going to meditate.
Excellent.
So your school was a weird thing. So I had legendary mates. I loved sport. I just didn't get educated at all. So I left school at like 16. I mean, I've had enough. I'm out. You know what I mean? At the same time, and I don't want to talk too much about this because my parents, I love them to death, and they're still alive. I mean, they don't really, you know, but they were both my mother, unfortunately, was very mentally ill, and my father was very mentally ill. So, I mean, we're talking mental institution, mentally ill. Do you know what I mean? So that was...
Well, as a result of being involved with the cult?
No, I think my mum, I mean, I don't like to say genetically, because, you know, obviously we've got genetics and epigenetics, but certainly a family history of it. And there was, you know, schizophrenia there and bipolar on the dad's side. So, I mean, family life was... Look, again, I'm not going to moan about it because I had a great time, but it was mental. You know what I mean? It was, you let's put it this way. You didn't know what you're coming home to, you know, and you know what it's like. I mean, you're probably about a similar age to me. So, you know, we're the latchkey generation, as we're called. Do you know what I mean?
I guess I'm 47 in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, right. So I'm a couple of years older than you. I'm not yet 50, but I'm heading that way. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, so you're part of your Gen X, for the latchkey generation, yeah. And so as such, you know, we, as you know, we were brought up mainly on a diet of American movies, you know, that kind of, you know, sensibility a lot, you know what I mean? That we, you know, and we came home and parents weren't there. You made yourself a cup of tea, had your biscuits, didn't you? Sat down and watched Grange Hill, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, that was your kind of, that was your, so there was this kind of strange normal existence, you know what I mean? And then that kind of batshit world of mental illness and cults, and then all I wanted to do was join the military and play rugby and box. That's all I was interested in. Do you know what I mean? So quite a strange mix, you know, quite a strange mix. But at the end of the day, you know, to keep that all, you know, kind of, I suppose that's part of the story over. I left school at 16, and yeah, man, I mean, I had severe anxiety disorders. I had OCD, trichomania. You know, there was a lot of obviously consequences of that kind of, you know, an upbringing. You know what I mean? You know, but I was a strong, you know, minded little fucker. So again, it was this strange kind of world where I was still trying to keep myself healthy. I still had this brutal will on me. You know, it's the hardcore will. But at the same time, I had anxiety, OCD. I'd pick my skin till I bled. You know, I was just trying to get by. I was, you know, and I ended up working in nightclubs, bars, restaurants. I did every job you could imagine. I was a cycle courier, a cleaner. You know what I mean? I did them all. Yeah, everyone, because I'm quite well spoken. So the school I went to was private. So I've got a relatively posh voice, but people think, you know, I'm from money and posh is not at all true. You know, I've done all the jobs, all the things, you know, the only good thing about the school was it did teach us not just some Indian philosophy, but taught some Western philosophy as well. And I enjoyed the Western philosophy a lot, you know, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It's kind of interesting. And a lost art in society, I believe. You know, everyone's become so New Age and Eastern mysticism that I think that they've forgotten the incredibly rich, intellectual, useful heritage, you know what I mean, of our Western philosophers. And I think that's a big hole in society right now. You know what I mean? And I'm certainly in my own little way trying to bring that back, you know, but anyway, let's talk about that a bit later. So yeah, 16, drugs, alcohol, did every drug known to man, you know what I mean? Lived in squats, crazy bastard, did, you know, bad things, crime, all of it, as you did as a London boy, just to try and handle life really, just to get by. But again, still had a great time. Like I said, this weird existence of having a great time on the one side and then it was hell on the other side, you know what I mean? So it was kind of like this bizarre, kind of split experience. And then when I hit 20, I was like, fuck it, I'm out. And I managed to save up enough money to get to Thailand, lived in Thailand for about 4 months. And I managed to get a ticket over to Australia and landed in Australia with $40 in my pocket. And that's another long story, which I won't bother going into. But I, you know, managed to kind of, yeah, get by in Australia. Had an amazing time. Took far too much LSD. And so by the time I got back to England when I was about 22, my brain had finally blown. You know what I mean? The anxiety, the OCD, the trichomania, the LSD. Yeah, the combination was like, wow. All right. Yeah, all the drugs, the alcohol, the dope, you know, other stronger drugs, you know. And so, yeah, I got back to England and I was probably about 22. And I was like, fuck, you know, yeah, I'm fucked. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is bad. And then as life has it, I went mountain biking with a friend of mine and I didn't have a helmet on for the last section and I had a head trauma and got swelling on the left lobe of my brain and didn't leave my house for like about 4 months, 3-4 months. And unfortunately, not because I wanted to, but kind of suicidal ideation started kicking in because I didn't realize how traumatized my brain was. You know, I had PTSD from it and also PTSD from childhood. I didn't know any of this. I'm just trying to get by, you know what I mean? And I think that's the problem with the spiritual upbringing is you try and reframe everything as this kind of like spiritual, you know, path when actually a lot of it's functional.
Learning experience.
Yeah, a learning experience. And so you kind of, I certainly had a very hard time distinguishing between what was physical trauma, what was the learning spiritual experience, you know what I mean? What was this? It was quite a muddy time, should we say. And I think like a lot of people, you think about taking your life, not because you want to end your life, you want to live, but you want to end the suffering that's in your head. That's kind of like the frame that I had. I certainly want to live. Yeah. The trauma, that was in, like, because trauma often manifests itself in many ways. And mine was quite physical. It was like people scratching nails down the inside of your head, like your brain. Do you know what I mean? So it's quite a physical experience that was kind of tormenting to me. And so I've needed to end that. But I'm an empathic, compassionate dude. And I remember when I thought about it and I saw the train driver, I was like, I don't want to fuck his life up. You know what I mean? Like, it's all well and good taking yourself out. You don't want to fucking ruin someone else's life. So I kind of came to my senses and said, right, mate, if you keep on going this way, you're fucked. So you've got to go 180. You've got to go the whole, turn this round, And so I did. I didn't drink for 14 years, didn't have coffee, didn't smoke. I just went clean. Did all the usual new age nonsense, some useful, some not so useful. Did the, all the cleanses, all the detoxes, all the fucking juice fasts, all the, crazy shit down in Glastonbury. Most of it did fuck all. And then I because of my childhood, I managed to get a degree, go to a degree. I went and met the philosopher professor in the University of North London. I said, look, I left school at 16. I've got fuck all qualifications, but I bet I'm as good as anyone on the course in philosophy. And he goes, well, how's that? And I said, well, I told him my upbringing. And then he gave me a call 2 days later and he goes, yeah, you're in. So I managed to get onto a degree without any GCSEs or A-levels or anything. You know what I mean?
Nice.
Later when I was about 24, 25, you know what I mean? And then from there, I just started, kind of getting my critical brain back together. You know what I mean? Started developing my brain again. And then I worked restaurants at the same time. So at the time in London, when you went and got a degree, they just threw money at you, mate. You know what I mean? They gave you credit cards, money, loans, everything. I was like, this is fucking great. So I got a tiny little bed sit, worked. And at the same time as doing my degree, I became a personal trainer. I did kinesiology. I did exercise physiology. I did anatomy and physiology. I did started beginning my hypnosis training. I did a bit of NLP, bit of coaching. I just started kind of educating myself on everything I had missed. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I kind of like, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, you know what I mean? Because I didn't think I was that smart because of obviously what happened in my childhood. So I started realizing, actually, hang on, I've got a brain on me. I just haven't used it. I haven't been taught how to use it. And so I'll always be thankful for that degree because it kind of like reassociated me to my intelligence, you know what I mean? And then through that, I had the confidence to go and do all these other courses. And then by the time I was about 27, 28, I had a huge body of knowledge. You know what I mean? I just kind of accelerated learning. I'd gone off, I was nuts. I went celibate for 3 years, no women, no girlfriends, no nothing. Yeah, I know, wild. I just went all in. Studied Egyptology, studied, shamanism. I just did the whole fucking, book, the whole encyclopedia, mate, really. And then
shamanism, that's something I don't, I think you're one of the few people who's brought that up on any of these interviews. That particularly interests me. I'll just make a note here. Come back to that later because it's something I studied, and there's a hell of a lot, I believe, useful stuff that therapists can learn from studying that.
Yeah, for sure, dude. For sure. Yeah. Absolutely, bring it up anytime you want. Anyway, that's a bit of a big rant, dude. I kind of feel like I've talked for quite a while. So, what do you want to know?
No, well, it's cool. No, that's good because viewers and listeners who've perhaps not encountered you before, the next thing is obviously, so you've learned it. We've got to the point you've learned it. You've got this body of knowledge. You've got conventional qualification as well because of getting into the degree.
Yeah.
You then, how long was it? Because on your time scale, so we're going, let me think about this, 2003, so things have to be filmed, so we're going to at least 2002, which is like 20 years. It's got to be a little bit in the 20 years or a little bit over that ago 29. From where we are now, that it's a very quick window then, because from 29 years to 22, what's the difference? 7 years. So within 7 years, you got yourself in a position where you'd filmed a television series. So
I think I was 29 when I filmed the TV show.
I mean, that's quick going from like kind of doing the study and then going out there and starting to actually landing a TV series. Can you tell us a bit about how that came about? Because I mean, that is seriously impressive going.
Well, my first ever training after I, I trained with John Overdurf and Julie Silverthorne.
Yeah, I've got my NLP trainers with them. Yeah.
Oh yeah, nice. And I did their Ericksonian course. Yeah. And I've always made a shout out to John, because look, I wouldn't say he saved my life, but he definitely, I would say, accelerated my my ability to get back on track and make something of myself. You know what I mean? And I'll always be thankful for that, because as a result of the head injury and all the weed and drugs that I took, in IXS and Qs and NLP, when you look down, left and right, you're basically banging around between auditory, digital, and kinesthetic. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So anytime I was asked a question like, what do you want? I couldn't go visual constructed. I just couldn't fucking do it. So I literally just couldn't access the part of my brain that would allow me to begin to conceive of a future. Yeah. So after the first kind of 2 days of this training, every poor bugger student who was working with me and would ask me, what do you want? My brain would fall out. I'd have an anxiety attack, look down, ADK and just swim around down there. You know what I mean? And so I remember John picking me up about this after the class, and every time he goes, what do you want? And I started trying to go down, he would just kind of click up, look up right, look up right, look up right, and force my brain, to go up and access, VC, visual construct. And I remember after that experience, I used to drive a motorbike, and I kind of got out of the classroom and the whole world had changed me. You know what I mean? Like this, that I could see the colors and I could feel the breeze on my body, massively. I was alive again, because obviously, as you know, from all the work that you've done, it's all well and good meditating and drugs and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is, if you've already got a predisposition to anxiety disorders, they can internalize you so much. You don't even pay attention to things like the breeze of the wind on your skin or the sun or the colors. Do you know what I mean? You're so internalized. You're so, kind of doing fucking, internal dialogue. You know what I mean? That you just don't, in internal perceptions, you don't even really connect with the outside world at all. So it was the first time that I really kind of felt the world again and a future opening up. So John, if you ever listen to this, mate, I'm always, very grateful for what you did to me that day. And he also reconnected me. And he also reconnected me to my humor as well. I was always a funny fucker. And I thought, and life had just beaten it out of me. Do you know what I mean? It just beaten it out of me. I was always gregarious, funny, a crazy motherfucker. And I was just so serious, you know what I mean? And, it's so serious. And he reconnected with my humor, and that really helped me kind of find my way again. So big shout out to John, John Overdorf, you know what I mean?
Big shout out here as well. I just want to clarify, Law, I studied the videos and stuff of John's. It was actually one of John's licensed trainers who certified me. So shout out to Richard Haggerty. But yeah, John's book, Training Trances,
brilliant.
I'd recommend that as well to all viewers and listeners. So, sorry, I interrupted. Continue, because you're partway on this journey to explaining how you ended up landing the TV shows. Quick.
Yeah, well, and then what I did at the beginning is I used to combine personal training, because I was one of the first to really understand, obviously, in personal training that I used to personal train in some of the biggest gyms in London, and obviously I understood that the mind was the barrier to most people's success. You know what I mean? Like, losing weight and getting into shape is just a mathematical equation, really. Do you know what I mean? I mean, everyone in this day and age always bangs on about hormones and this and that. Yeah, sure. There's always an exception to the rule, but the 80-20 rule is it's just you're eating fucking too much. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you probably don't have enough muscle mass. That's probably the two dominant factors. Not enough protein, not enough muscle mass, and you're eating too much excess, energy, whether it be fat and carbs. That's the equation. So of course, I started bringing in the NLP and hypno, into the personal training and having these private clients, and I started getting quite well known around the fancy parts of London, Hampstead, and this kind of area, because I was working with, kind of wealthy people doing that. Everyone thought it was amazing. I'd personally train them, and then we'd have a kind of sit down and NLP kind of session and hypno session afterwards. And everyone thought this was the best thing ever. You know what I mean? And it was fucking great, Mm-hmm. And then a girlfriend of mine got a job at Henlow Grange Health Farm, and just outside London, the famous kind of Henlow Grange Health Farm, where all the celebs and rich and famous go there to wear, white towels and you know, and not do any health thing at all. Not, yeah, you know what I mean? and I said, well, can you get me a job then? So I went, and they said, yeah, okay. And so it was pretty amazing. We were the first people, like, you know, without sounding too egotistical, but I will wave my flag now and again. You know, I was the first person in England to start up this kind of alternative approach in health farms. You know what I mean? So I started up a mind clinic in a mind and body clinic in in Henlow Grange, and it was amazingly successful. I got so many funny stories from there. But you know, I was about 2 or 3 times a week, I would go and give talks to the what they call the residents. You know what I mean? The people who would go and stay. And sometimes there would only be 10 or 12 people. Sometimes there'd be 50 to 100 people. And then at the end, I'd say, you know, if anyone wants to come and see me tomorrow, my books are open. And I was always like, wow, I'd wake up in the morning and go into work and I'd have a full book of clients. So I was very, very lucky, mate. You know, unlike a lot of people these days, and I know that you're great, you always walk your talk as well. But, you know, I was seeing a lot of clients. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, from very early on in my career, you know what I mean? I was seeing 30 new clients a week, which is a lot of new clients.
Yeah.
You know, even people who say they see 30 sessions a week, they're not new clients. Do you know what I mean? But mine were like 30 new clients a week. And I was very successful, you know, just using very basic tools that I'd learned, you know, some of the really basic kind of, you know, stuff from John and Julie, and some basic NLP stuff. And there, obviously, a lot of TV producers and media bunch were there. And so one evening I was giving a talk, and the next day someone gave me a call, said, hey, someone from whatever agency is on the phone. I went, hey, can you resolve phobias? I went, yeah, of course. They said, can you do it live on TV in front of a few million people? And I went, yeah, sure.
Excellent.
And so I went and did that. And then they were like, okay, this is interesting. And they said, oh, we've got a meeting for you. And I was like, okay, what's the meeting? And they said, well, we've got Endemol and Discovery, and they're both interested in working with you. Endemol was doing Big Brother at the time, so they're the biggest production company in the fucking world. You know, Discovery is obviously huge. And so I walked in, and it was interesting. And this is maybe interesting for the listeners, mate, because I know that you are, again, one of the ones who gets this. But I went in, and they said, tell us about NLP. And I said, how many people have tried to talk to you about NLP? And they went, literally, you're the 13th or 14th person we've had in the last couple of weeks, because we've heard about this NLP. And I went, I'm not going to tell you anything about NLP. And they went, what do you mean? I said, go and get 5 people who are fucked up, got problems, bring them in, and I'll sort them out. And they went, are you serious? I went, yeah, sure, no worries, bring it on. And so they brought me a smoker. They had someone who had a phobia of clouds. They had, a couple of other people. And then I just did some basically kind of stagey type stuff with one of the producers, and their brains were just blown. They were like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? And I was like, all right, well, I've just shown you it. And so about 2 weeks later, they said, well, you got the show. And I was like, all right. Now, what's the show called? And they said, it's called Change Your Life with Alistair Horscroft. And I went, perfect. I love that. You know, my name is Alistair Horscroft, and I'm going to change your life. No problem. That sounds great. Anyway, about a week before we started filming, I get called into this office, yeah? And I'm sitting down like, oh, fuck, is it being cancelled? What's going on, you know? And they said, well, listen. And I said, okay, go on. And they said, we don't want to call it Change Life with Alistair Horscroft anymore. And I said, well, what do you want to call it? They said, we want to call it the Life Guru. And I said, no way, I'm not doing it. And they said, what do you mean you're not doing it? I said, I fucking hate gurus. I've come from a cult with gurus. The last thing I'm going to do is, associate myself with gurus. There's no fucking way. And they're like, it has to be the Life Guru. I said, why? They said, we want to make you a brand. And I said, well, I don't really want to be a brand. I just want to help people. Because hand on my heart, Alex, hand on my heart, I didn't have this desire to be like a guru or famous. I truly had overcome my own issues, much to my astonishment, because I'd seen psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists, you know what I mean? Like I was in a bad way, do you know what I mean? And none of them fucking moved the needle at all. Do you know what I mean? They didn't fucking help me at all. It just made me more uncomfortable, to be honest. And then when I started doing this kind of work that you know and I know, and all of a sudden I started, along with the philosophy, started literally reprogramming my brain, and so I could function healthily. And so I really felt that I owed it to kind of NLP, and I owed it to hypnosis. Do you know what I mean? And I owed it to the general populace to show them how easy it was to actually resolve your things. Do you know what I mean? That was my genuine intent, But But of course, they wanted me to be the fucking new Paul McKenna, because at the time they weren't into Paul McKenna. People don't realize this. Paul had been associated with as a hypnotist, yeah, and a stage hypnotist, and they didn't want that. They wanted the next kind of like
because the time level we're on about 2003 to 2005 discovery, and then into 2007 kind of worldwide. Is that kind of transitional period. He was doing. Yes, he did have McKenna Brain, and he was running the NLP courses with Bandler, but public-wise, as you say, he was still very much thought of first as a stage hypnotist, whereas now he's managed to switch it the other way.
Yeah, and I'm glad he has, because he's a great guy. You know, no two ways about it. But they genuinely wanted me to be Paul McKenna. What Paul McKenna became, they wanted me to be. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so they said, no, we want to brand you. And I was very uncomfortable about this. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't know about this. I need to go and think about it. And I was pretty tormented, dude. You know, really, it was very close to saying no. But I thought, oh, well, I've been given this opportunity. Let's just kind of go with it, you know. And so I was given this show, and it was pretty wild, man. I mean, you know, because the problem is the first couple of episodes, I just went in and just got it all sorted in about 45 minutes to an hour, just by doing kind of like NLP talk stuff. So of course, no one knew what the fuck I was doing. You know what I mean? Yeah, you're doing linguistic reframes, maybe a phobia cure, maybe this bit of linguistic timeline. You know what I mean? And they got no idea what I'm doing. It's like, well, that's a shitty show.
Yeah, they want it to be a bit more visual storytelling, don't they? Yeah,
that's right. So all of a sudden, I'm like making timelines out of kids' fucking railroad tracks, you know, you know what I mean? I'm doing all this kind of stuff. And so I had to be honest, if I have a gripe with the NLP community, I mean, I've got to be honest, the NLP community, most of them, it's a bunch of bitches, really, but we'll talk about that later. You know, I'm not a massive fan of the NLP community. You know what I mean? I'm not. Do you know what I mean? You know, my biggest question to them all is, where is your excellence gone? You know what I mean? But that's another discussion, you know? But I was always just like, yeah, everyone was just so egotistical and so full of themselves and so much narcissism. And I was like, well, aren't we just meant to be trying to make our own selves excellent? Do you know what I mean? And prove excellent lives, being able to do excellent things and help other people. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was always very binary for me. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't a particularly involved, complex thought process.
I'm going to ask you the question. I ask the questions that other people perhaps wouldn't have the balls to ask, or wouldn't think of asking me, because they've not had the experience themselves. And I'm not saying you've had this experience, okay? So I fully expect you to turn around and say, no, wasn't like that. But from my personal experience, being involved with television production, helping people cure the phobias and such like, and being the backroom boy for certain television life coaches, who apparently I'm not allowed to mention the name of because of non-disclosure agreements, but everyone just needs to tap that phrase in Google and you'll see me associated to them, is that the TV company obviously get their researchers to go out and find people with the weird and wacky issues for you as the therapist to then deal with. Yeah. And it's my observation, both personally and with clients that I work with, in terms of them being the front people on screen, that whilst they would honestly, if connected to a lie detector, swear blind that it's all completely genuine, as you see on screen, which from their perspective, arguably it is, that taking a step back and looking at what the researchers do and the way they handle it and the way the production companies, the outcome they want, is that certainly an element of what I call attention-seeking fuckwits, people who just want 5 minutes of screen time, end up becoming people with the alleged problems that really probably were never a problem to the degree they're claiming it to get on the show in the first place.
Well, it's a shame we don't have a 3-hour chat, mate, because I've got stories for you around that. You know what I mean? So I'm going to half agree with you on that. I'm going to say, yes, there were a few people who were like that. I would say, in my experience, the majority that I worked with weren't like that. And I'll tell you a couple of stories later from some of the live TV stuff I did that are so batshit mad, do you know what I mean? That I think you might go, oh yeah, fair enough. You know, fair enough. So I would say I would concur that that absolutely happens, but I would also have to say that with a number of people that I work with, that definitely wasn't the case. They were broken, should we say. And I know in NLP, no one's broken and no one needs fixing. Yes. Okay. Well, metaphorically, you know what I mean? Using the
Well, in
language.
fairness, you've got to be one. You've either got to be at the point where you're that broken you don't mind effectively airing your shoes on in the media, or you've got to have another motive for doing it. It's got to be one or the other, in fairness. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now I completely agree with you. I think they're either attention seeking, yes, they're crazy, or they're so lost and they've tried so many things that you do truly become their last resort. They see you as the Messiah. And I would say that unfortunately, I had quite a few who saw me as the Messiah. You know, but I'll tell you some funny stories from that a little bit later, because they were pretty hilarious and wild, you know.
I'm just going to put the TV funny. I've got my notes there for later. So keeping in order of the things I've got here, I want to kind of now go off on one slightly, because we're going to come back to the TV as we've written that there. So tell us a little bit about the thing that you're currently in the release process of. I notice you've got a package coming out called the Hummingbird Method, drug-free transformation as powerful as plant medicine, being the strap line. What's this all about for the viewers and listeners? Because it looks pretty funky.
Alex, you're great, man. You're very well researched. And I appreciate that, dude. It's nice. That's going to be out in a few days. So, you know, and again, these are questions I'd like to ask you, really, because when you get to a period of having done it for however many years, 25 years, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Obviously, you start getting your own take on things. Well, I did very early on, you know, and you have so much firsthand experience, you know what I mean, that you kind of start seeing patterns of what work, you start working things out, you know, start seeing things differently to how your trainers, what you learned, you know, to get you, I mean, hopefully you'd always want to, not out of arrogance, but certainly you'd always want to, you know, hero worship's always been a strange thing for me, because not through arrogance, but through honoring, I've always wanted to better my heroes. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because I think our duty is to always try and improve, to evolve. And I find that has always been very frustrating to me in the world that we live in, the personal development and NLP and hypno world, is most of it's just a regurgitation, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's, there's no new thought, really, you know. And I was like, okay, is there anything new that I could bring to the table? And I think I have. I think I've brought a new program in regards to coaching, which is called the 4-domain system, but that will be released in about a month. And I think I've got something kind of cool that I can't claim is completely new, but I think it's new enough to be useful, but also with enough touch points to those who have come with us to make it accessible. So I've always been, out of everyone I've studied, I've always been like a huge fan of David Grove, you know, the New Zealander, you know, who basically the father of clean language. Yeah. Yeah. And I never met him. I wish I had. I had two main heroes in the world, of this world. It was him, and it was also Steve Andreas. Yeah. And I only ever got to talk to Steve Andreas on the phone. I never got to train with him or meet him, but I always thought his books, Heart of the Mind, Transform Thyself, I thought these were some of the better, most practically useful books, you know, in the NLP kind of catalog. And I always was very thankful to the NLPers who kept it practical. You know what I mean? Like, you read the book and could do the thing, you know? And I was like, yeah, isn't that what this is all about? It's to codify it. So you can, if you've got half a understanding of NLP, you can read the process, do the thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then there's other NLPers who get so intellectual about it, you know, with their 5,000 meta programs, you know what I mean? Rather than just using the 10 that are most useful, you know, that it becomes an unusable intellectual, you know, babble, really, you know. And I always thought that was relatively counterproductive, you know, to the, what's that saying? You know, I heard recently, it's like, you know, genius is great, but simple genius is so much better.
Nice.
You know, and I've always appreciated the people who can make simple genius, because it can be accessible to as many as possible. You know what I mean? I'd love genius as well, but you've really got to sit down and work your way through genius, you know? But simple genius is something the everyday person doesn't have to, you know, can kind of advance their life with, you know. But anyway, back to the Hummingbird method. So if I'm honest, when I train now, whether I train coaching or hypno or NLP, it's predominantly through my version of clean language. And I think my version of clean language is the cleanest version of clean language that there is, you know. I think even if you look at, you know, Grove's, you know, clean language statements, some of them aren't particularly clean, you know, they're relatively leading in their own way, you know. And my main differentiation between how a lot of people work is the difference between an associational unconscious and a spontaneous unconscious. Yeah. So that's something that I have a big kind of bee in my bonnet about when people run NLP processes or even hypnotic processes, is a lot of the time there's nothing unconscious going on at all. It's just the conscious mind coming in and free associating, and they're thinking that's the unconscious, and it's just fucking isn't. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of top of mind, you know, imagery, you know, or symbolism that actually isn't anything spontaneous from the unconscious, you know. So whenever I'm working, like say for example, you're doing a parts integration, you know, and the average NLP trainer or NLP practitioner would go, right, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think of a symbol that represents the part of you that, do you know what I mean? Well, as soon as you say that, the conscious mind is just going to come up with an associational, what I should put there, you know what I mean? Or some kind of fleeting image that they kind of capture, or something that they've read or, you know, recently, you know what I mean? Which is very, very different to saying to someone, okay, I'd like you to drop down into your unconscious. And I'd like your unconscious, and only your unconscious, to come up with a representation of what's really going on. You know, it's a very different piece of language. Yeah. You know, one is demanding a connection to whatever you want to call it. You know, we can have that discussion later, deeper mind, unconscious, or whatever, that actually causes some kind of transderivational search into, you know, the unconscious. Do you know what I mean? To create some kind of symbolic representation that's actually going to be useful, you know what I mean? And just a conscious association. So a lot of my work is about differentiating associational versus spontaneous unconscious, you know, kind of metaphor and symbolism, you know? And I felt that even a lot of Grove's work was relatively superficial, should I say, you know what I mean? Like sometimes he did get the change, I don't deny that. But normally if you actually read some of his, the work or the stories on him, you know, he used to take a long time to work people through, you know, his kind of process. And I'm pretty convinced that's because it took him a while to actually engage like a decent connected unconscious, you know, expression, you know, rather than an associational kind of expression. But anyway, so the Hummingbird method really is this kind of concept that I've come up with, which is that really when you dig down into it, life is about narratives, yeah, about stories that unfold. Okay, and so your life is a narrative, isn't it? Beginning, middle, and end. Yeah, but within your life, you have sub-narratives. Every relationship is a narrative, beginning, middle, and end. Yeah, every health journey we go on is a narrative. You know, everything's a narrative. Yeah, every business is a narrative, isn't it? There's a beginning and then a thing, and it ends. So of course, we run into problems when at a certain point in the narrative, it starts looping. Yeah, and it can't, you know, kind of express itself any further. Like a book, we get to chapter 3 in the book and it just ends there, you know what I mean? Even though, you know, and so then story just, you know, loops and loops and loops. Imagine reading a book and you get to chapter 3 and then the rest of the chapters are just chapter 3 repeated, you know? And that's really how a lot of people go through life, you know, whether it be a relationship or business or, you know, any area of life. They'll get to a point and then that point just loops and that's it. You know what I mean? Their stress responses remain the same. You know what I mean? So they just cope in just the same ways. They may use alcohol, maybe use drugs. They may have a problem interdynamic in their, you know, marriage. And very few people really ever transcend or move. I don't hate the word transcend, so let me just recant that. Very few people ever work through that. And that part of their narrative just loops, doesn't it? Yeah. So I think our job really mainly is just to help people kind of, you know, break the loop of the of that part of the narrative so it can unfold to the next chapter. You know, that's really the big trick of life, you know. And
now that's because something I was going to ask for your view on. That's the perfect time because of what you just said. You're saying that the trick is to help them break that kind of loop.
Yeah.
I conjecture that the only thing, certainly the biggest thing by far that we do as therapists, maybe not the only thing, but certainly the biggest percentage factor, is that we, with whatever modality, don't matter, whatever important seeming ritualistic process, merely give the person who's stuck in that loop, to use the metaphor analogy you've just given, an excuse and permission to break it and change what they're doing. Because up to that point, I'll just give, this is the example I always give when asking this question. Let's say Dave, the cocaine addict, gets up one morning and he goes, you know what, I've had enough cocaine, not going to buy any more. In fact, I'm going to throw away this that I've got here as my morning stash. That's it. And he gets on with his life, never touches cocaine again. As a result, he naturally ends up thinking differently. You know, there's all the knock-on effect. But he bumps into family members and friends over the next couple of days and they go, bloody hell, Dave, you're looking better than I've seen you in ages. What's going on? And Dave goes, I've knocked the cocaine on the head. And the family members and friends go, you what? Nice one. How have you done that? And he goes, well, I just woke up one morning, decided I wasn't going to have any more. And he goes, you what? You just got up one morning, decided you weren't having any more. Why didn't you do that sooner, you fucking idiot? And the reactions they would get would be one of, why didn't you do it sooner, for example? And that would end up ultimately leading to that individual relapsing to prove it wasn't that bloody easy to just, and to prove that they weren't a effing idiot. Whereas if they go through the ritual of going to see someone like yourself or a therapist or whatever discipline and go through this important seeming ritualistic process, and then they are no longer addicted to cocaine, when they bump into those family members and friends and they go, Dave, you're looking really well, what's going on? And he goes, well, sorry, this is coming out. I've knocked the cocaine on the head. And they go, wow, how have you done that? He said, well, I recently heard about this therapist who's out XYZ celebrity, and I had to save up the money, but I managed it. It was difficult, and I went, and I've had to do the therapy, but it's worked. It's amazing. And now all self-blame, shame, guilt, regret, and remorse is removed from him or her for not having got off their arse and done it themselves sooner. And it also gives them a kind of safety shield so that the family and friends can't go, why didn't you do it sooner? Because he's already kind of answered that by, I didn't know about the therapist, then I had to get the money together. But ultimately, they could have always done it themselves if it wasn't for the fact that it would have ended up likely undoing because of the scenario I've just given. And I would argue that that is the biggest thing that we do as therapists.
Well, you've always had, I remember back in the day, I got your entire collection,
Oh, good God.
I remember a long time ago, I can't remember when it was. I would have been 1999, 2000, probably. I don't know. Let's just say around that time. You had a big stack of DVDs, which I have to say, one of them, I laughed so hard, and often when I'm teaching stage hypnosis, I tell that story and everyone's belly laughing. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life, mate, you do know that on the other side of the world, in Australia and in Thailand and America and other people I've trained, I've mentioned your name and one of your things, and the entire room has fallen around laughing. And I'll tell you what it is in a moment.
Yeah, please do. I'm curious now. Which one? Yeah.
So I think there is some truth to what you're saying. So say, for example, if you look at Jeffrey Schwartz's book, which I think is one of the great books, it's called You Are Not Your Brain. Yeah, and it's one of the great reads, okay, about self-directed neuroplasticity. Mm-hmm. He says that basically simply at the level of brain, you know what I mean? It's going to be basically a very train us like a mammal monkey. Do you know what I mean? Like really, it's, which is basically operant conditioning. You know what I mean? Where basically, associate with the thing that you want and reward yourself for it. You know what I mean? Or, and he basically posits that every so-called negative feeling or thought that we have, the solution to resolving that is to ignore it and focus on what you do want, and then over time, self-directed neuroplasticity demands that the neurons rewire, and your brain repatterns, and hey, you got a new behavior, a new thought process. So
Donald Hebe's law, neurons that fire together, wire together.
And so it's basically nothing more than putting your attention, where it needs to go, where you want it to go, rather than where it wants to default. So we could say that all of these patterns are stress response defaults, like taking coke, whatever it was, and then you kind of put your attention somewhere else. And so I kind of half agree with you. I think there are different ways in which you can obviously change people, and I think that what you're saying is there's a lot of right to it, but I don't think it's the full thing. That, from my perspective, obviously we're both professionals, and we could chat about till the cows come home. Do you know what I mean? I'm not denying what you're saying. I just feel there's a little bit more to it. You know what I mean?
I would say there is a little bit more to it as well, but that other little bit more, only really, in my opinion, made up of two things. One is making the individual actually feel as though they're worthwhile, that they're loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished and valued, building up the self-esteem, self-image, self-confidence, self-control, their self-worth ultimately, because otherwise if there's an imbalance in any of them, they're going to seek something to fill the gap, smoking, drinking, whatever. So we build them up. And then the other element, and big element, I believe, is placebo response.
I think placebo is huge. And I think that a lot of the work, I think what I like that what you're saying is it's often a lot easier than everyone claims. And I'm completely with you on that. So, for example, I was coaching a guy the other day, very, very successful guy, but he kept on using this excuse that he has self-doubt, so you would get to a certain point and then self-doubt would come in, and then, so what I said to him really was, look, listen, you've heard about stress responses. And he goes, yeah. And I said, all that self-doubt is a stress response. You get to a certain situation, your brain starts getting overwhelmed, because it's being tested to go to the next level. It's being stretched beyond its comfort zone. You're all from a neuroscience perspective, it's being required to go against to burn more calories and to go against familiarity and security and go out into risk, which it doesn't like. Do you know what I mean? So from that perspective, all that's really happening is it's getting overwhelmed, and your stress response or your code for overwhelm is, oh, I can't do it, and self-doubt. Yeah. And he goes, yeah, fair enough. So I said, so every time you have self-doubt, just simply say to yourself, this is just a stress response, and lean in. And he goes, really, is it that simple? I went, well, give it a go. Yeah. And of course, now he doesn't have any problems with that area. Yeah. So I would say that my version's as simple as yours, but I suppose I'm using more, kind of neuroscience-based approach, to dress it up. You know what I mean? Maybe.
Well, don't get me wrong. What I'm talking about here is between us as therapists and viewers and listeners as therapists. Absolutely. I would not tell the client in front of me any of this. Clearly not. Just to clarify, this is very much a Alice, a Wizard of Oz. Even I was thinking of it. No, I get it. What I'm saying is maybe from your perspective, if I was to go to your model of the world, my frame of neuroscience and neuroplasticity, maybe that is the prestige. You know what I mean? Dressed up. You know what I mean? That gives the position that you're talking about. That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So I'm saying, maybe it's I'm just got a different metaphors really, because that's what people don't quite understand is most thinking anyway is not all, but most is metaphorical anyway. Do you know what I mean? So you're just using a different metaphor than I am to give the person permission to go, oh yeah, right, I can just do that then. So the reason one of the reasons I came to these conclusions, aside from seeing results, I mean, you could call that confirmation bias, obviously. I get that, that could come into it. What came to these conclusions was, and we mentioned this much earlier, and I've just seen my bullet point there, was years ago when I was kind of like 12, 13, so we're going 80, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, that sort of era. I was doing psychic fairs in England, doing tarot reading and whatnot. And I ended up getting invited to a sweat lodge. which at the time I didn't know what it was, and to be honest, I thought it was a bit bizarre when I first got there. For any viewers or listeners who don't know, it's basically it's like a sauna that's been built out of stones in the middle of a field nowhere. And you basically get your kit off and go in, and there's a ritual element to it of offloading your stresses verbally, and that's by the by. That was my first, what the hell's going on here? But I ended up reading up on and getting involved in shamanism to a degree. And one of the things they do, is, I'm sure you're aware, is power animal journeys, which to the therapists viewing or listening who don't know about it, my layman's explanation of that would be that effectively the guy who ran this on me, he had a box full of plastic animals, because they were all bought out. So, you know, you've got the bear, the tiger, he had the plastic representations of them. And what you would arguably as a therapist probably recognize as a progressive relaxation, muscular relaxation, and then mind, mental relaxation, journeying somewhere type induction process was gone through, albeit they don't refer to it in that manner. And a journey took place in the mind, guided visualization, call it what you will. Although the one thing I now know, having looked at what you would recognize as the script, is that there came a point where I was left to go and wander in a forest, and I would come face to face with an animal. And when I did, at appropriate time, when I felt it was safe, I would awaken, and I would know which animal it was. And metaphorically, this was my power animal. And I went through this, and to be honest, I can't even remember what animal it was I came out and said. But I do know, and obviously the embedded suggestion was there visually, that it was one of those that was displayed by the plastic animals was there, which I was then given to keep as a focus symbol. Now that sounds all a bit winky-wanky, I suppose, to the way I've just explained it to people who've not been through it, but it is presented in such a serious and sincere manner by the person running it, that at the time it seemed very significant indeed. And this was just before I ever got qualified in hypnotherapy anyway. But as time went on, I looked back on that and thought that had all the components, shamanism within it, and albeit they use different terms in their books, the Native American Indians, all of hypnotherapy is in books on shamanism that predate hypnosis and mesmerism and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot that I agree with, and then there's some things that I think, yeah, maybe need to be investigated in what you said. Yeah, so I would say that the experience that you had, I don't mean to be rude, but it sounds a little bit like just a new age kind of, you know, Kmart shamanism. You know what I mean? Like that's, well, not, I don't mean that in a rude way, but that isn't normally how one would in that world assess or connect with a power animal, you know, with some plastic ones in front of you. But that's another story. I think this leads...
thing that added to it, Lord, the guy who did it was American. Yeah. So he had a nice American accent, which made it all that more.
Yeah, those fucking Americans with their American accent, everyone falls for it, don't they? You know, I always, whenever I heard myself doing hypnosis, when I first started out, or when I'm speaking to, I go, I think they're probably expecting an American, you know? And then you've got your English accent and you're like, oh yeah, maybe it's not as sexy as the American. Hey, we'll get into it. This kind of leads into the Hummingbird Method, to be honest. So we kind of
cool.
I think it really does kind of pose some very interesting questions and things that are worth exploring. And again, I don't want to go too far into this, but I think this might be an interesting insight. So obviously one of the things that I enjoyed most about some of the NLP work, some of David Grove's work, was this whole concept of the isomorphic transition. you know, are you familiar with that term? So an isomorphism basically means a one-to-one relationship, and it kind of came out of science. There's metaphorical isomorphism. And basically it's the idea of, say, for example, I'm working with a client and I say, okay, so they go, I'm doing anxiety. And I say, okay, so what's your anxiety like? And with that language, I'm kind of inferring, give me a metaphor, you know? And so, for example, the client says, oh, it's like a burning fire, you know? So now we have a metaphorical representation of the anxiety, don't we? Yeah. So we would say that's an isomorphic transition where the presented issue, yes, has now been domain mapped or isomorphically transposed into a metaphorical equivalent. All happy with that? Now, when this kind of therapy, or David Grove would do his work, the idea is, or even Erickson, because most of Erickson's work is actually around isomorphic transitions, is if I can present a solution within the metaphor, yeah, it's highly likely that that metaphor, solution, the metaphor will be domain mapped back into the experience of the individual. Yeah. So what does that look like? Well, this is where egos and my desire for the Hummingbird method is to try and prove to everyone, yes, that actually we don't need really facilitators, or we do need a facilitator. The only facilitator you really need is someone who is absolutely clean in what they do. Yeah. So remember, you're talking about tarot. You talked about tarot when you were, did the tarot thing. Well, tarot readers are always amusing to me for the simple reason is they feel the need to be a conduit or a middleman to the information. Yeah. You know, what would happen if the client just looked at the, pentagram of whatever the fucks and got their own interpretation? Well, no, that's not allowed. We need mystical tarot.
Well, actually, I agree with you. The majority of tarot readers do it the way that you just mentioned, but there are some really clever ones.
Yeah.
Who the open, because the shut eyes, who believe the psychic. I never did. It was called an open eye, because I came from a magical trickery background. And there are some, and I did towards the end, literally, they pick the cards and I tell them very briefly, this is meant to mean this generally. However, I get a sense and a feeling that these mean something very different to you.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to take a few moments to look and tell me what it is you feel that this could mean to you, and just sit back and say nothing and let them do all the talking.
See, that I would say would be really most likely highly useful. Yeah, like far more useful than having the tarot reader. Why? Well, because again, in metaphor, you have what we call implicit and explicit metaphor. An explicit metaphor is basically an archetypal metaphor where it's been a part of our collective unconscious for so long that we've all kind of agreed upon its meaning, like warrior, sage, magician, lover. I mean, these are all archetypes, yeah, because, and as a result of that, they've become a part of our collective unconscious symbolic language.
People generally understand them in a similar manner.
In a similar way, that's right, yeah. Of course, implicit metaphor is what you were doing, which is, but you were kind of going half-half. You gave them a bit of an explicit metaphor. This is vaguely what it means, but then you allowed them to put their own implicit or intrinsic meaning on top of it. Yeah. The question would be, is, say, for example, you hadn't told them what any of them meant. Yeah. And you just said, well, here's a picture, what does it mean to you? Then that is going to rely purely on implicit, interpretation, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And in later years, I didn't do it with the tarot, but because of that tarot background and effectively realizing the worth of what you just said, crikey, we've had the pandemic, so that's added 2 years on somewhere. So I think it was about 2017. I ran a course that I called Psychophysio-Energetic Alignment of Changing Energies and Emotions, which the acronym PEACE. Give your clients inner peace. And what I came up with, because years ago at the psychic fairs, I wanted to make more money. So what I did was I got a sort of credit card size piece of paper, and I literally got a book from the library on talismans and stuff. And I draw things like, the eye in the pyramid in a circle, but loads of different talisman images on this card, and I photocopied a load of them on card, cut them out so they're credit card size, put this instruction pamphlet together and called it the Amazing Talis Card, carry this around for luck, energy, success and all this, and sold them, and that was back, good God, 1988-ish, 89, for 10 quid a time. And people actually would come back to future psychic fairs and said their life had changed dramatically of carrying this around, which is another reason why I got so heavily into the idea of the placebo. But then years on, combined with the tarot thing we were just talking about, I thought, oh, it's dead easy to find images already done now, clip art, copyright free on the internet. So I went and found loads of different coloured talisman images, weird, laid a load out on an A4 sheet, printed it out and called it the energy board, and started experimenting, just putting it down in front of people at the start of a therapeutic session with one suggestion only. There's a lot of images here. They're not meant to make any sense to your conscious level at all, so don't worry about that. But you'll be drawn for some reason, you'll know why when it feels right, to one or maybe more of these images. When you are, just let me know. And leave them to it, and they'd end up picking one or two or whatever. Sometimes they go, well, I don't know, but I'm being drawn to those two and those. It didn't matter. Whatever they did, just react as though that's normal. And I'd have the cards with those images on separately, so they're not on the board, so we could take those out. And whatever bollocks I thought up at the time, literally. So it might be, so are you getting a good feeling with them, a bad feeling? Leave them to do all the talking, and then get them to move the images around or rip them up or burn them if they were bad ones, or if they were good ones, tell them the key. Whatever was logical to have changed things the opposite way around, so that metaphorically they've changed it, so they'll get the result. And the thing is, it works. But, although frankly, it's bollocks.
No, you see, I reckon that you should bring your energy board back, because I think you're getting closer and closer to the essence of things. And this is where it gets very, very interesting, because first of all, what you're doing is quite similar to psychotherapeutic sand play. You know what I mean? Where they just, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff, you know. But again, my problem with all of these is, see, as you know, like the thing I've always kind of liked about you from afar is you've always been brutally honest. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I've always appreciated that.
Well, my version of honesty, because obviously everyone's own experience is their experience. Yeah.
But you've attempted to kind of, like, as you said, be the Wizard of Oz. You've attempted to open the curtain and go, well, it's not actually like this, it's like that, or, you know, this is this and this is that. And I've always appreciated that. There's nothing that I can't stand more than, you know, people who create mysticism and magic to sell shit when they're about as genuinely mystical and magical as, you know, a fucking children's, you know, magic set from, you know, Kmart for $9.99. Do you know what I mean? It drives me up the wall. And of course, I personally believe that New Ageism and Eastern mysticism have kind of contributed massively to fucking up not just the planet, but certainly the area of therapy. Do you know what I mean? It annoys the shit out of me. But anyway, that's another conversation. Maybe if we have a part 2, you know what I mean? Maybe if we do an interview part 2, you can let me unload on that. But anyway, let's go back to what you were saying, because I think that is at the heart of what we're now honing in on, like, quite a profound concept that you've kind of, in your own way, you've kind of worked out. Do you know what I mean? But I said, you've got a cynic's head, so you've kind of worked it out with your cynic head, yeah? But if I wouldn't look at it cynically. I would look at it being A, an NLP who models things out, and B, a philosopher who always wants to look at things what we call a priori rather than empirically. So
in fairness, from that point of view, then it will come down to, I don't know, I'm not making this overly simplistic, but, you know, I've forgotten who said it, but the answer to everything is within oneself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but let's unpack this a little bit, because what your energy board is actually quite similar to the Hummingbird method, but again, the differences. Yeah. So if we go back and we kind of top and tail what we've covered already. So we talked about implicit and explicit metaphor. Yeah. And we talked about, the problem is we've talked about also a therapist or a tarot reader wants to be the conduit. They want to be the middleman between knowledge and answer and the client. Yeah. So there's obviously already a distrust in the client's ability to come to their own conclusion. Yes, because they need a middleman to help them, you know, facilitate, get that answer. Yeah. So I've always been like, whenever I do therapy or NLP or change work, I always try and literally remove myself, and my only job as the middleman is to facilitate rather than answer, unless I'm in a role where I'm coaching or I need to give data. Yeah. So, because obviously our maps expand with data. We need knowledge sometimes. You know what I mean? You can't just go, oh, I'm going to get it all from within. That's the biggest load of shit I've ever heard. That's like putting someone on an empty island all by themselves and say, learn everything about the world. You're not going to learn fuck all. You know what I mean? You need to be in a community with people who are more intelligent than you to learn from, so that your map of life in the world expands. You know what I mean? Like a man is not an island. You know what I mean? So all this kind of like all these people who go, oh, you learn everything from within. No, that's absolute nonsense. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, oh, you want to play that game? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop you off in the middle of the fucking Pacific on a little sand island. You've got all the water that you need, all the fucking food that you need, but you go and try and work out quantum mechanics from the fish. You know what I mean? And we'll come back to you in 5 years' time and see how far you've got. Do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. You know what I mean? Yeah. Of course, you need people who are extraordinary and learned. Do you know what I mean? To learn from. You know what I mean? Of course you do. Yeah, so that's half true. But saying that, we are getting to a point where, if we go back to my initial example of the person who has anxiety, and I said, okay, what's your anxiety like? And they said, it's like a burning fire. Yeah. Well, I did exactly this with a room of about 500 psychologists, therapists, hypnotherapists. They're all in the room. Yeah. And I set that up as a scenario. Yeah. And I said, okay, so you've got this person and they've now expressed their, fire as a metaphor. What do you think needs to happen next? Yeah. And of course, everyone's like, well, tell them to put water on it. Tell them to blow it out. You know what I mean? So of course, what they all did is come from their model of the world. Yes. That has nothing to do with the client. And they've tried to solve the problem with their metaphorical idea about how that problem should be solved. Yeah. This is fucking stupid. It's insane. The ego involved in that exchange is so mind-blowing to me. Do you know what I mean? But yet, the whole NLP, hypno, and coaching world is full of what I just said. Yeah.
Sadly, yes. I couldn't agree more, because, well, yeah, that's an entirely different. It is the old therapist searching for answers to their own bloody problems. It's their own.
That's right. But not only
why not? I guess you're going to say, why not just ask the client what needs to be done to it?
Well, but kind of, nearly. But yeah, kind of, but yes, but no, because obviously similar is not the same. So yeah, I am, but no, I'm not. But first of all, just for the listeners, because I know you get it, let's get really, really clear that exactly as you're saying, most therapists are so unresolved themselves that when a client brings up, it's like a fire, they try and solve it how they would solve their own problem, which is a massive fucking error. Do you know what I mean? Yes? Yeah. Your job is not to do that. Your job is to remain absolutely clean. And exactly as you're saying, is invite the client to explore this a little bit more. Is there anything else about the fire? Which would be a classic David Grove question. Yeah. But here's where we run into what we talked about a little bit earlier, the spontaneous versus the associational. Because if I let the conscious mind now come in and bugger around with the fire, yeah, ain't nothing going to happen. Yeah. So I have to find a way of getting the conscious mind out of the way. How do I do that? Well, that's not hard. You just go become the observer, let your conscious mind get out of the way. And then I'd like your conscious mind is allowed to feedback what it observes, but it's not allowed to change what it observes. Yeah, that's the big difference. Yeah. So the conscious mind can go, oh yeah, I can see a fire. Yeah. And it's a large fire, about 3 foot tall and 3 foot wide. And you know what I mean? Okay. It's allowed to do that. But when I say, is there anything else? The conscious mind, once again, is allowed to observe and feedback what the unconscious has presented. But now what has to happen is I now need to engage the unconscious to do the next thing. So once that's occurred, I need to say, okay, now I'd like you to drop down into your deeper mind. I'd like to ask your unconscious what needs to happen. Yeah. You observe. You don't get in the fucking way. I don't want your conscious mind to try and twiddle and work out what needs to happen. I don't give a shit about what your conscious mind wants to happen. I want you to get your deeper mind. Now, then what happens is this starts becoming a narrative that unfolds. Yeah, this starts becoming a narrative. So say, for example, we do all the other therapists did, put water on it, put it out. Yeah, going to do nothing. If I invite the client to connect with their deeper metaphorical mind, and here's where maybe it gets interesting, because if you look at books like The Cosmic Serpent, which is about ayahuasca, or you look at certain books like Yu Jung, or you look at savants, you look at a lot of these areas, there is a working theory that I personally am quite a believer in, that actually symbolism is actually such an innate part of us. Jung said this as well, that it's actually a part of our genetics. Yes. So
yeah,
because
I agree. You've only got to look. Some people I think I've lost the plot now when I mention this, but you've only got to look at declassified MK Ultra documents, to see that it wasn't just mind control with trauma-based mind control that they were looking at. They did look at the triggers for going from one alter to another, one mind state to another that they implanted, were visual imagery.
Yeah.
And a lot of their research also then was taken on by the Tavistock Hospital, which became the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, which has then, as its most recent offshoot, has become the Behavioural Insights Team in Westminster, which is known as the Nudge Unit. And one of the major things that they do, in line with the 77th Battalion, I think I've got the right one, which is the PSYOPs of the British Army, is what they call mimetic warfare, which is visual image memes in order to capture people, because the research shows that the visual imagery, the words that are on it, which quite often are propaganda that they want, are more likely to go in because it goes directly into the unconscious, bypasses the critical faculty because of the visual imagery. So
great, dude. So great. I love what you just said. And would be pretty much all in with you on that one. You know what I mean? So yeah, so we have this amazing theory, idea, concept that, as you said, symbolism or metaphorical symbolic language is such an innate part of us that it is a part of our genetic code. Yeah. And that's where we differ to animals. You know what I mean? So, but anyway, that's another story. But let's say, for example, once again, we go back to the fire. And I managed to get the conscious mind out of the way and just allow the unconscious genetic code to begin to express itself. Yes, this unconscious symbolic narrative. And I said, well, what needs to happen next? And I truly am able to get the spontaneous narrative to unfold. Well, in this actual case study, what actually happened is these wind came in and made the fire larger. Yeah. Now, of course, the conscious mind freaked out and was like, no, fuck that. I don't want the fire to get larger. You know, because of course they knew that there had been this isomorphic transition, that the anxiety was the fire. Yeah. So they were like, fuck that. You know, so they tried to get out of it. And I was like, no, just relax, drop down, and ask your unconscious what needs to happen. They said, oh, that's interesting. All of a sudden the fire's burnt down, you know, the forest and the trees around. Okay, what happens next? And then of course this narrative unfolds where the fire burns down the trees, it goes, you know, all blackened. Then over time, the blackened stuff becomes the new soil. Yeah. And then the new soil becomes plants, and then a forest, a green forest with lots of life and stuff. Yeah. And then of course, at the end, hey presto, the person doesn't have their anxiety disorder anymore. Okay. Why doesn't the client have their anxiety disorder anymore? Well, because of the isomorphic transition. The solution was put in the metaphor by the unconscious. Yeah, it unfolded as a narrative, broke the loop, yes, that we talked about earlier. And then, hey presto, we have a solution. It's like I divorced about 9 years ago, and I had insomnia for about 3 months. And I was running a course, and I was like, fucking hell, you probably best get some sleep. You know what I mean? Like, because I had all these thoughts, like, oh, my mum was an insomniac, but my dad wasn't, but my brother is. Shit, maybe as I'm getting older, I'm becoming like my mum, you know, all that kind of conscious thoughts. So I was like, no, shut the fuck up and just deal with this. You know what I mean? So one night, I just put myself in and said, okay, I'm conscious. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and this is quite an interesting thing. And I'm giving you quite a lot here from my recent work, but for those listening, the whole thing is in the Hummingbird Method. Do you know what I mean? And I explain.
Go to the link below the video or the podcast speaker. If you're on the podcast channels, go to the link.
Released for a couple of days, but I reckon it's one of the best few $100 you're ever going to spend, because it's going to go into the things we're talking about now in great detail and actually upgrade your skills quite significantly. So the conscious mind was trying to, do all this kind of nonsense. I said, okay, drop down, mate, into your unconscious. And here's where it gets interesting. So say, for example, we talk about gestalts, yeah? And the word gestalt, parts that make up the whole. Well, say, for example, I'm a psychologist and I'm working with an anxiety disorder. They might work out a little bit of the gestalt, as in, oh, the anxiety happens when such and such happens, and it might be related to this incident in childhood. Okay, so they've got some parts that are making up the experience of anxiety. But of course, you and me know that anxiety can affect innumerable parts of someone's life. You know what I mean? Like from how they sleep to how they wake up, to the foods they eat, to how they go through their day, to, you know, relationships, to childhood, to this. You know, I mean, there's a lot of parts that make up this term anxiety. And so all of those, so anxiety is really just a generalized term for the gestalt of all the parts that make up anxiety. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So a lot of the time when we just try and work with something in its most singular, because a lot of people go, you've got to get and just work with the anxiety, you know what I mean? Well, yeah and no, because if I say to the unconscious, I'd like you to get a representation of anxiety, I'm actually limiting the gestalt. Yeah, I'm dictating that actually the anxiety is the most important part of the gestalt. Does that make sense? But if I say, if I talk about the anxiety and I have the person consciously begin to talk about all the way it affects them, and I begin to kind of allow the conscious mind to, as it were, create links to many more aspects of the gestalt, yeah? And then I simply say to the unconscious, so I'd like you to get an image or representation of what's going on, yeah? That open generic language actually, in my experience, causes the unconscious to actually begin to create symbolic narratives or imagery that contain the entirety of the gestalt, rather than just the limited term within the gestalt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
You're following what I'm up to, yeah? So often when I'm working with a client, I'll kind of get them to talk about all their stuff, yeah? And then when I engage their unconscious, I'll say, I'd like your unconscious to get in touch with what's going on. And in that looseness, yeah, I'm giving the unconscious permission to actually connect with the major part of the gestalt or elements of the gestalt that are actually causing the biggest problem. Now, I learned that technique from brain training and QEEG neurofeedback, where I learned that when you retrain a brain, you can't actually demand, say, for example, you go to brain training to resolve autism or anxiety or depression. Sometimes that's not the first thing that the brain resolves. The brain actually resolves the thing that's taking up most of its energy first, that might not be that thing. Okay. That's interesting, no? Yeah, because human beings are so linear and we're so kind of, we think we're so right in how we go about doing things, we actually forget that we're working in narratives and gestalts all the time. And our conscious mind isn't always aware of what the most important part of that narrative of the gestalt is that's going to have the greatest impact on that person's life. Yeah, we just assume that the thing that we want to work with is the thing. Does that make sense? Because that's the thing that we become kind of neurotic about. Yeah, but actually, when you look at you know, a brain training, you know, neuroplasticity, when you look at, you know, changing brainwave patterns with neurofeedback, yeah, you actually start realizing that actually the brain starts to decide, yeah, what it wants to sort out first. And that's not always the presenting problem. Yeah, so sometimes you might, I remember I went and did a 22 neurofeedback sessions for one particular area of life I wanted to improve on. And for about, you know, 11 sessions, I was like, well, this isn't really doing anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, then on the 12th or the 13th, the thing that I wanted to sorted out. But then I realized, oh, hang on, all these other things had been sorted out, but I hadn't been able to see those things because I was so obsessed with the one thing that I wanted to sort out.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if we go back to the Hummingbird method, and I was talking about my insomnia. Well, my insomnia was represented by a glass vase with thousands of spiders in it, and these thousands of spiders kind of fell off, you know, fell down and went everywhere. Now, my conscious mind could easily start wanting to go, oh, what do the spiders mean? You know, are they my thoughts? What's the spiders? You know what I mean? So of course, most people, they want to try and get the answer before the narrative is unfolded. They want to get the answer in chapter 3 or a quarter of the way through the movie, rather than letting the movie play out. And that's why a lot of people never succeed in actually breaking a loop or actually changing their life, because they keep on trying to attach meaning or understanding far too early in the therapeutic process. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah, it does.
So I basically, because I'm obviously long in the tooth with all this kind of stuff, I let my conscious mind, told it to quieten down and just asked it to unfold. And then basically, to cut a long story short, eventually all the spiders kind of went, some went behind pictures, some went outside underground, some went in the corners, and they went massively still. Yeah, I fell asleep and my insomnia was gone. And then post change, over the week or two that followed, I kind of allowed myself to have some reflection on what occurred. Yeah. So some conscious integration, for want of a better way of saying things. yeah, and I kind of thought, yeah, maybe the spiders were my thoughts, and this was that, and this was that, and this was that. And I started kind of seeing, I suppose, the isomorphic transition, the solution, you know what I mean, that occurred.
Yeah.
But I didn't really, investigate that until the change had already happened. Yeah. I mean, you know that as well. I mean, imagine you're running timeline, or you imagine you're running your energy board on someone, and they want the answer 5 minutes in, but you know that actually it's going to take 20 minutes before the process is ended. And then at the end of the process, they'll look back and go, oh yeah, fuck, they have their epiphany. Yeah. So the biggest problem with the conscious mind, or people in therapy, and especially in talk therapy and psychology, is they go to a therapy session, and then the therapy session reveals something, and then they become neurotic about that thing, and then they start talking about that for the next fucking 20 sessions, when in fact that thing was really not just part of a minor thing. I mean, they needed to do all 3 or 4 hours and then look back and they could see it in context. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, to sum up, the Hummingbird Method really is my way, honoring David Grove and NLP and blah, 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 blah. But I think that I've genuinely worked out to a certain degree how plant medicine works, because all plant medicine really is doing is using metaphor, yes, but getting drugs to get the conscious mind out of the way so you can fully involve yourself in the metaphorical narratives that unfold. You know what I mean? And I feel that I've just created a more complete system than Grove did. I think Grove got a lot of the way there, and he himself acknowledged that his work was like, what do you call it when open source? Do you know what I mean? So he wanted people to take it further. And so, I feel that, well, I know, because I've obviously helped a lot of people with it, and I'm pretty proud of it, mate. It just kind of, I think it just it provides, not only will it provide you with an awful lot of, solutions to problems, I think it'll also make people a much cleaner practitioner, yes, where they don't have to be the one with the answer. They can truly be what I think we all eventually evolve to being, yes, which is just to facilitate, to have the person get in touch with their own, unconscious processing.
Which I agree with you entirely, but to play devil's advocate, I've got to ask this, because ultimately the client does it for themselves, as you've just alluded to. But what about the importance, or rather, I don't know if importance is the best word, perhaps the psychological perception and need in some people, belief they may already have, whether it's conditioned through films, TV, stuff they've read, or the fact that a friend of theirs has said, I went to see XYZ person, they did this. The need for an authority figure to tell them everything's going to be okay, that they can do this. Because obviously with something where, I'm guessing, Hummingbird Method wise, you kind of say this is something they could do solely for themselves, isn't it? Yeah. Well, what about those people who perhaps got that preconceived idea that they need that authority figure, that approval or that guidance?
Yeah. So here's the thing with that, dude, and I'm actually writing another program on that as well. And
right, cool.
And that's in part because I've got a bit different take on hypnosis, and I know that we would absolutely agree on our take on hypnosis, but I've got a different intention now for where to take the world of hypnosis, because I'm a little bit over hypnotists, if that the truth be known. Yeah. And it's based really off the work to a certain degree of Julian Jaynes, who wrote the very famous 1977 book called The Origin of Consciousness and the Bicameral Mind. So, it's, just go on to Wikipedia and you can get a brief sense of it. But if we leave that aside for a second and we just go to Milgram's experiment, the famous Milgram experiment, we know that around 70% of the population are submissive by nature, 30% are dominant. We know that out of the dominant, only about 5% actually have attuned truly into their dominance. So what do we actually mean by dominant? Well, someone who is truly dominant has basically worked through or has been born advantaged to be able to no longer be beholden to tradition, parent, authority. You know what I mean? They are truly intrinsically generated. Yeah. So they are truly their own inner authority. That's what it means to be dominant. Yeah. Someone who has true inner authority has a very strong directive, powerful conscious mind that is able to be the dominant to the submissive unconscious mind. Yeah, because if we go with the model that you were using, you're saying that obviously when we know that in hypnosis, when we hypnotize someone and we use prestige, do you know what I mean? We're being the dominant, aren't we? Yeah, we're being the dominant and making their unconscious submissive, aren't we? That's really what we're doing, yeah? So, of course, if you've got empathy, you're still being dominant, but you're being lovingly dominant. You're being kind-heartedly dominant, yes? AKA, I'm a facilitator, I'm a therapist, do you know what I mean?
Love and light.
Love and light, do you know what I mean? But we know that all the love and light gurus are hardcore dominants. That's what they are. And they're hardcore narcissistic dominants. That's what they are, yeah? You know, they're not that dominant, because when they come across someone who's actually more dominant, their dominance starts to fade, but they're at least pseudo-dominant. Yeah, we know this. Yeah, if you've got a guru, he's a dominant, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? Obviously, if they haven't done the work, they come apart in, you know, front of a true dominant. And I don't mean to be egotistical, but I've always been both physically and intellectually better handle myself. Yeah, and, you know, boxed from a young age, and once I got my brain working again, you know, I can, like you know, I can think things through. So I would go to gurus, and they can't physically intimidate me. You know what I mean? They can't intellectually intimidate me. And so they would come apart at the seams very, very rapidly. All of them. Didn't matter who they were. Some big NLP names, you know what I mean? Who, I remember one, he got so annoyed with me, you know, very famous, one of the most famous ones there is. He's like, if you don't fucking shut up, I'm going to come down there and I'm going to remove you from my room myself. And all I said was, come on then. And he sat down again.
Nice.
I used to be a guru buster. I used to go to all the gurus, the mystics and the gurus in London, and just call them out. And my trick was just to make them angry. I'd just make them angry. And once they got really angry, I'd say, oh, for a guru, you've got great emotional control. That was my trick. So, but going back to what we were saying, I think I do agree with you. I think, unfortunately, you know, we're still in a world where a lot of people need a dominant to get them to do stuff. My next mission, once Hummingbird and the 4 domains are doing their thing, yeah, is really to try and have everyone truly understand what true self-ownership is. I mean, people don't get it. If you're still doing what mummy and daddy tell you to do, if you're still doing what your religion tells you to do, if you're still doing what the crystal waving featherhead is telling you to do, if you're still doing, you know, what your peer group pressure you to do, you know, go out and drink and get fucked up all the time, you know what I mean? If you're still taking the abuse of your wife or your husband, you know what I mean? If you're being ruled by your kids, you are not a dominant. You do not have, you know, true inner authority, you know. And, you know, someone with true inner authority, you know what I mean, they're a different breed to be around. You know, they're not assholes at all. You know what I mean? They're, as Virginia Satir would say, they are truly on the level. You know what I mean? They are able to express themselves clearly, have boundaries. They're able to be vulnerable, but only to the people that they choose to be vulnerable with. Not like this new woke brigade who just want to be vulnerable with everyone. That's fucking stupid. Do you know what I mean? You know, you have to assess, you know what I mean, who you can be vulnerable with and who not to be. Do you know what I mean? You know, you are able to be a distractor in as much as you're able to fit in if you want, but you're also absolutely able to not fit in if you don't want, you know? So, you know, you're someone who's truly done the work, you know, they're a different breed. And that's what I'm interested in helping people become, you know what I mean? Because you get to a point in life, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we might have a differing opinion, but it's respectful, and I'm going to listen and I'm going to learn, and I'm not challenged or intimidated. And I would hope that you're not challenged or intimidated by me. You know,
no, I mean, I'm a believer that the fact is, there is no question that what you do and whatever your beliefs behind it are has consistently worked well for you for years. Simple as. People's lives have been changed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't particularly matter how you got to that point, as long as you were consistently getting those results and those people's lives were being changed. Yeah. The rest of it is kind of, you could argue, completely bloody academic. As long as it works, excellent. But obviously, as we know, as human beings, we do like to kind of take ownership of things and have a sense of, and I suppose that's where the being human bit comes in.
I think so. And I also think that there is a, I don't know, I think in life sometimes, I don't know whether you call it an inner calling or whatever it might be, but, currently, if you really think about what we do, and I think that we are in a position where, like, I've always tried to massively separate myself from clinical psychology, because I'm not a massive fan of clinical psychology. I think it's so full of holes and so ridiculous that I've always tried to clearly say, no, I'm not that. And I'm not trying to be that. Like, go and do that if you want, but I'm something completely different. Do you know what I mean? Like I want that to be very clearly stated. I'm not one of those people who tries to be a hypno counselor. No, I'm not a counselor in any shape or form. You know what I mean? If you want to go and see a counselor, go and see a counselor. But that is not what we do here. Same with clinical psychology. If you want to go and see one, knock yourself out, go and do it. That is not what we do. One thing that really irritates me about our field is everyone trying to be hypno-psychs or hypno-counselors. It's like, no, put your flag in the sand and be what you are. You know what I mean? Like, stop trying to cross-contaminate. You know what I mean? I find that, kind of annoying, to be honest. But I think more importantly, I think that, if you take what you were talking about, with the MK Ultra and the memes, yeah, and you just extrapolate that a little bit, really what's happening is human beings, the smartphone has become an extension of the human nervous system, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
And we say that, and I know you know it more deeply than most because of your understanding of the mind and hypnosis, but the average person doesn't understand that. And then most people who think they do don't truly understand that all that's really happening is you are just becoming part of a technocratic algorithm. Yeah, that you are absolutely losing inner authority at a daily rate. Do you know what I mean? Like you are being programmed. Do you know what I mean? Like,
anyone who's not seen it, you've got to check out the Social Network documentary that was on Netflix. It actually shows you how they program the algorithms to affect you emotionally. So you get that dopamine hit, serotonin hit rather, because you feel good because you've had extra likes on your Instagram or whatever. That's why it pings. The ping is Pavlov's bell.
And it's so wild, Alec, and you know this, and so I think the next iteration of the hypnotic world for me, yes, is really having people understand that they're kind of living in Inception world. Do you know what I mean? Like, for me, it's more the societal hypnosis. And for me, it's more, you really want to break free? You really want to break free?
It seems that we're reaching a similar point at the same time. I've got a documentary called Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis. It's time for the I can't even say it now. It's time for the sleepwalking zombies to wake up, which it's now free to get on YouTube and stuff, but it was originally launched on David Icke's iconic TV platform. And it's exactly that, societal hypnosis and brainwashing, conditioning, psyops. There's loads of different names for it, but as you know, it's basically fucking around with people's brains.
Absolutely. And then in an attempt to resolve this, you've got people like Jordan Peterson becoming huge, household names. And it's not that he's bad, but he's pretty regressive. You know what I mean? He's pretty regressive. You know what I mean? All he's done.
Well, some would argue he's controlled opposition. He's the perception that this is the way to escape from societal conditioning, but it's purposely not designed to actually set you fully free in the way that obviously you've got this desire and aim to help people do.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, of course, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but all Peterson's doing is he realizes that he's not going to win by going hard, I'm a Christian. Yeah. So what he's done is he's kind of doing a Jung thing where he's basically using the Bible as a metaphor. So now people can't argue with him because he's like, it's just a metaphor. We're just using dragons now and metaphors, and Jesus is a metaphor and all this, you know what I mean? So all he's really doing is reinterpreting, religion, you know what I mean? Through and kind of, I mean, I do believe he absolutely believes in Jesus, but he's kind of holding that back a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And he's just positing forward the metaphor. And so some people go, well, why is that wrong, Al? And I'm like, but it's not wrong, but those worlds have had their time. You know, I mean, they've been going for thousands and thousands of years.
But surely, arguably, all religion, and this is just my opinion, you may have a different, but all religion really, albeit that the people who are heavily involved would never really admit this, but my take is that all religion it is metaphor. You read the Bible, it's metaphoric stories. It didn't literally happen the way it's wrote down. The Lord's Prayer is a bloody metaphor. It's hypnotic induction. Our Father who art in heaven, in your head, hallowed be thy name. On earth it will be done as it is in heaven. In other words, in your unconscious mind. It's a guidebook to the fact that we are our own creators. Hence, phrases like his divine power gave us everything we need for life. It's all coded in there that you are your own God, your own creator.
Well, I agree with you on that point, but I don't think that that's, you've interpreted it because you're, you know, well read and well studied, and so you've interpreted it that way. But actually, if you look at it historically, you know, the Abrahamic religions have always been favored by the right wing because there's one authority, yes? And so with one authority, there's a singular power over, and there's one actual way of being, one right way of being. Do you know what I mean? And so on.
Well,
and so
that's where, is it Netflix again, or is it Amazon Prime? The I'm having a mental block. The documentary series, The Family.
Yeah.
I think it was called The Family.
Yeah.
Which is about all the politicians and high-ranking people who run the world, all, and their involvement in this, what is arguably a kind of cross between a religion and a mafioso organisation.
Well, that's right. But you see, but the problem is we've got to a point where the left aren't any better anymore because people don't understand that the origin of the left. The left really came to being in the mid 1800s in France with the Jacobites. And the Jacobeans were basically for the people. They were against the elites and the royals and for the people. Yeah. So they took down the monarchy to give back power to the people. Yeah. And so the true left are meritocratic. Yeah. So they're a meritocracy where basically they want the best in each field to be the person who leads that area of the field. Every human being should be given the best chance of expressing themselves as fully as they possibly can in this life. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, the true left were kind of legends, but now it's been hijacked by these fucking liberals, do you know what I mean, who are A, naive, B, clueless, C, mesmerized by identity politics, Eastern mysticism, you know, and a combination of, you know, obsessive gender ideology and, you know, and minority. And they're forgetting that actually the left's job is to encourage and create a society where every single individual, yes, has the ability to, you know, or be given at least the opportunity, yeah, to express their fullest self, you know. And yeah, it's so but the irony of all of this is the libertarian right are now closer to that idea than the left, you know what I mean? So it's completely nuts, do you know what I mean? But the problem is the libertarian right know that, yeah, so they're playing a good game at the moment. But once they got power, then they're obviously going to fuck off to a more, you know, kind of God bothering, you know, elitist way. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, you know, I suppose we're getting on a little bit here, but everyone's fighting the wrong fight. The fight is against the elites. That's what the fight is against. The fight is against the elites in media, the elites in politics. Yeah, the elites in technology, you know, everywhere you see an elite, that's where the fight is. Do you know what I mean? And people have lost sight of that because, you know, somehow everyone's been kind of given this permission to be your own king and queen. So everyone's like a mini elite. Not
Well, it's the
realizing.
old saying, isn't it? Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely, it's so true. And so now everyone's trying to be their own king and queen, which I totally understand, because everyone's like, well, fucking hell, the world's mental. So let's just look after ourselves, you know what I mean, and our immediate family. But that's, you know, I don't know, it's not particularly progressive. I think that life is about expressing yourself and becoming everything that you can be, but absolutely about helping everyone else attempt to do the same. You know, if you're just out for yourself, you become a narcissistic fucking moron. And if you just look after others, you become a hopeless fool. You know what I mean? It's about becoming a fucking legend and God yourself and helping everyone else do the same, you know? And that's the best of life, mate. You know?
I like the way you put that. So we've covered the 4 domains, we've covered your Hummingbird method that's coming out. All the links for this will be below the video or the audio speaker on the audio podcast. Please do go and check them out. And I also want to point out, because it has been alluded to, but that Alistair also runs courses in hypnotherapy, NLP, and coaching that collectively says
The alchemy of mind.
Yes, thank you. I have got a note that says Alchemy of Mind here, which I've lost it. Alchemy of Mind courses, which are, I guess, a blend of it all. Can you tell us a little bit about them for anyone who's watching or listening who might be thinking, wow, what Alistair's been saying really resonates, and I'd like to look into his approach to things more.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for being so generous. Yeah, I run one major course. If you want to train with me, it's either 2 or 3 weeks long, and we just get into it. You know, we just leave no stone unturned. You know, we get into all the good stuff of NLP, which I've always thought shouldn't be called neuro-linguistic programming. It should always have been called neuro-linguistic reprogramming, you know? Yeah, you know, but anyway, yeah, kind of coaching, but again, not the dozy life coaching that doesn't get anyone anywhere, like really good quality balls to the wall, proper coaching that, you know, actually gives you the data that you need. You know, hypnosis, all the different styles you can imagine, but my favorite really, I suppose, is evolutionary. So I kind of have a lot of evolutionary psychology in my hypnosis, you know, and you know, we cover a lot of different stuff, a lot of different kind of ideas and philosophies, very, very, very practical. And yeah, we have just have an amazing time. So that's the major thing if you ever want to train with me in person. But we are looking in the future to probably get the Hummingbird Method out as a course that people can facilitate. You know, I think we're going to end up.
All right, cool.
Yeah, going down that route at some point, you know, just a one that people can kind of facilitate for a weekend and, you know, that kind of stuff. I think that's going to be there. But yeah, lots to see really. You know, I kind of hidden in the wastelands for many, many years, mate. I kind of just put my head down, and I wasn't a mad fan of, you know, the media world. As you know, we never got onto that, you know.
Yeah, well, the last 3 things have got media. You've just come back, you've segued back to it brilliantly.
There you go, mate. So so that's why I kind of just really, I kind of went out of sight, you know. Like I said, I don't mean it arrogantly, but the truth of the matter is, like, they wanted me to be the next Robbins, they wanted me to be the next Paul McKenna, and
it certainly, the way it looked in that era as the shows were going out, and you know, you were getting coverage in the tabloids, the broadsheets, the magazines and stuff. Had that continued, which obviously if you'd have been willing to, it could have done. You were on that trajectory. It was heading that way.
Yeah, I was offered a book deal for $500,000. I co-hosted with Melinda Messenger. I was the therapist to rock bands. You know, I was there, dude. You know, and I kind of just had a moment. I was like, I don't want to do this. I felt like I was a puppet on a string. You know, and the truth of the matter is, I've always enjoyed research and philosophy and actually working things out. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, the public figure thing, I never had that narcissism. I never had it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know about you, but even now, if I'm invited to go on stage, A, there's no nerves at all. B, I go up there, say what I want to say, and I enjoy it. But I don't come back going, wow, that's amazing, and went home and talk about it. It's like, it's just whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not something that has ever driven me, that kind of public, you know, fame, you know. But saying all of that, I would say now, as I approach this stage of my life, that I do feel I've got some genuinely useful things to share, that I'm proud of, you know what I mean? And so now I'm going to kind of I think it's time to kind of come out into the public domain again. So you probably will see more of me.
Excellent, exciting, nice one. Yeah, in terms of the media, just one final thing. Did you notice? I'm kind of guessing that you probably did encounter. Everybody does sooner or later if you're around the media. The whole falseness of it all. The being told what you've got to do. Hey, tomorrow you need to be here and be seen bumping into this person, or you've got to go and have dinner here so that we can do this gossip page article. There's a lot of manufactured bollocks in it, isn't there, that a lot of viewers and listeners just won't realise.
I've always been a fan of, kind of Joseph Campbell's work, and to a lesser degree Jung, but, Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, and you're going to meet all the inevitable people on your journey, aren't you? You know what I mean? And that's just a part of life, and, one of the big challenges, obviously, to become a whole is to recognize your persona, and become authentic, to not play the persona, and we all know, I'm sure you know as well. I mean, I'm pretty confident that if I went to one of your trainings, I would just meet the man that I'm talking to now. You might be slightly more exaggerated because you've got to teach in front of 100 people, but it's going to be you, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. The same with me. You come on a course, this is who you're going to get. Yes, there's going to be more exaggerated. I've got 100 people in front of me or 50 people, so I'm going to have to be more potentially energetic about it, but it's going to be exactly the same person, and I'll sit down, have a cup of tea with you, chat shit, talk about music I like, you know what I mean? Just because that's how I view life, I think the whole media world, and unfortunately so much of the new age and NLP, and it's just full of persona, isn't it? And
well, ironically, so full of people who are incongruent,
absolutely,
and yet they spend so much time going on about being congruent.
Yeah, I remember I was invited to do the NLP Superfest, about 500 people over in Australia, and it was great because I met Frank Puslik, who was the third co-creator of NLP, and we met there, and we've become great friends, and we actually talk every other week on, and have chats. So it's been lovely hearing his version of NLP, which is, maybe we'll do something on that one day, mate, because that's interesting, hearing about the actual origins of NLP. So I'm very close to the source of it, and he kind of told me, he's like, really, when he started out, he viewed it as this humanistic kind of, way of working with people, and obviously, I mean, good old Richard Bandler, as much as I think he's incredibly skilled, he himself admitted that he's a sociopath. Do you know what I mean? And, it's and I valued a lot talking to Frank, because it reinstalled my faith in the essence of what NLP originally was. Because, I'm a hardcore humanist at heart, you know what I mean? And you meet everybody with positive self-regard, and you want the best for people and see the best in them. And you know what I mean? And we're in this, I said, no man's land, and we're in this life together. Do you know what I mean? And I am massively into helping our brothers and sisters, our fellow men and women, as much as we possibly can at all times. I think that's our job as a member of the world. And I just think that the media is, psychopaths, narcissists, liars, just everyone on the hero's journey you don't want to meet are mostly there, just lined up for you. You know what I mean? And I'll tell my one issue was, I remember every time I would write a piece, you know what I mean? And I'd always say to the magazine or the newspaper, I'd say, listen, I want last say, because you're meant to get last say on the piece before permission to print, And they go, yeah, of course you get last say. I go, well, would I really? And yeah. So they'd interview you. And I would record the interview so that they couldn't fuck with me. And then the piece would come out, and they just lied. And I'd have the video, and I'd have the recording. I'd play the recording, and I didn't say that. I didn't say that. So then I'd go back to them and go, you just lied. And they would just go quiet on you. And then you'd go, well, I'm going to get legal counsel. And they go, okay. And they got millions and millions at the time. I didn't have much money.
And they go, okay, because they know full well the minimum back in the day, the time era of your TV series, would have been at least 25 grand first down payment to the solicitor to start proceedings.
Exactly. So they knew that you weren't going to. And so after about the 5th or 6th article, you know, and then I remember people, they were shocked because I remember one of the producers from Endemol, you know, she started getting kind of really demanding. And I was like, calm down. I said, I've got 15 people. I'm sorting them all out one after the other. You're giving me like 3 hours to do it. I'm doing literally the impossible. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, leave it out. And everyone, you can't speak to her like that. You can't. You know what I mean? And I was like, well, I don't give a shit whether I can or I can't. I am, and I will. You know what I mean? And I could already feel my character was oil and water. You know, they wanted submissive little bitches to do their bidding. You know what I mean? And they wanted you to go on stage and be the big hi, you know what I mean? Wavy fucking jazz hands. You know what I mean? And they didn't give a shit if you went home, you know, in the limo, just fucked up and ill at ease with yourself. Do you know what I mean? And that just wasn't how I rolled. So I was like, no, fuck you, I'm not doing it. I'll do it my way. And I think that's the wonderful thing now, isn't it, about YouTube and, well, currently, hopefully that stays, but for the most part, you can still say what you need to say.
Well, yeah, and there's people now doing like web series on YouTube and other platforms who are getting millions and millions of views. They're reaching a much bigger audience than a conventional TV show would. So things have moved on.
Yeah.
It's like a different world since you and me were regularly on the telly in the 90s and early 90s. It's just good luck to the young ones. I'm still trying to get my head around most of it, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. I've often thought that. I mean, you know, I wonder what would have happened if, you know, you, me, whatever, we'd been, you know, at the beginning of, I mean, to a certain degree we could have been, but what would have happened? But I don't know about you, but I don't think that I honestly don't think I had the capacity or the life experience to handle that back then. You know what I mean? I having millions of followers and all that kind of stuff, I think it would have killed me.
Well, yeah, because I know that I did shed loads of telly in the from 93 onwards till mid 98, when there was the whole News of the World fiasco. Circusofthemind.net, for any viewers or listeners who may not be quite aware of that ongoing legal case that I've got with Rupert Murdoch's media. And to be honest, I'll be very careful how I phrase this, because I don't want to give them anything to try and use to argue there. Well, it would be no defence for them. At the end of the day, they hacked my phone, drugged me, printed stuff that was never said, blah, 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 blah. However, they did do me a favour, because that fucked up my life at the time massively and landed me in prison for a bit. And that was kind of my, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Wake-up call.
Yeah.
And I did kind of realise, yeah, you know what? As much as it was fun on the one hand, hanging out in Stringfellows, spending every penny that I was getting paid for, you know, these shows for celebrity parties and all the pretentious bullshit, because that's what it was. I think if I'd have carried on and that had got any, I'd have probably ended up killing myself at an early age, one way or the other. I mean, you know, not necessarily suicidally, but
drinking drugs.
I was in. There is a dark side to show business.
I think it's mostly dark. I do think that. Do you know what I mean? I think, you know, and also, like, you know, yeah, I don't know. I just feel that if you certainly at this point in my life, like I said, back then I could help people. You know what I mean? I don't think I had anything useful to say, but I was definitely someone who could absolutely help people overcome their daily problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And now I genuinely feel I've got some genuinely useful things to say, you know? And so now if I do create a platform, I'm in a place where I have that kind of, as you said, congruency, you know, to, you know, kind of say what I say contextually and in a way that I would be proud of, you know, like when I launched the Hummingbird technique, you know, it's beautifully filmed. I feel very proud of the information I've shared. It's, you know, very well done. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm at a stage now where, yeah, I just don't want to churn out content. That's what everyone else is doing. You know what I mean? Whether I make less money as a result of it, I just don't really care. You know what I mean? I'm only interested in kind of putting out things that I think could genuinely assist, genuinely help, and genuinely be proud of, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I'd, like you, if I'd carried on that trajectory, I would have probably let myself, or I don't know, probably not, but let's say I would have done things that looking back, I wouldn't have been proud of. You know, even now when I look back at the Life Guru TV series, even though it predated Paul McKenna's, it predated everybody's, do you know what I mean? And I should be really proud of it because I helped 15 people overcome their issues, you know what I mean? It was great. You know, the NLP community didn't come behind me at all, you know what I mean? They were dismissive and this and that, and you got no love from your community, you know what I mean? And I think I probably would have at the time.
Jealousy and egos, very sad, especially when it was actually helping them as well by bringing it to the public's attention.
Massive. That's right. I was in the London Times, featured every magazine talking about NLP and hypnosis and how it can change lives. Yeah, they should have been fucking writing me letters saying thanks so much for the exposure. But instead, such little bitches, they couldn't bring themselves to do that. But I think that back then I probably would have been needy of their, what's the word I'm looking for? Acknowledgement, probably. Do you know what I mean? You know, and, you know, but now I couldn't give a flying fuck. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, now I'm like, come on, NLP community, like, get your heads out of your asses. You know, what the fuck are you? Do you know what I mean? Like, as me and my mate always joke, there's this one chick running around at the moment in Australia, just screaming at everyone like a bad Tony Robbins, going, make an impact, make an impact. I'm going to show you how to make an impact. I'm going to show you how to make an impact. And as we say, the only thing that she's ever made an impact in is the all-you-can-eat buffet.
Okay.
But it might sound like a shitty thing to say, but let's be honest about it. If you are claiming that your NLP can give you control over your own thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and on top of that, you're meant to be modeling out excellence. Yeah. Where's the self-control? Where's the excellence? You know what I mean? Like, come on, let's come to the party. As far as I can understand, you know, I mean, that's the only, I'm not a mad fan of Tony. I met Tony and I thought he was a nice guy, but I've got my kind of little issue with Tony, which is basically he's just not honest with his audience. Do you know what I mean? Which that's a little annoying, but he's kind of like a nice guy. But at least Tony Robbins, at least he kind of took the essence of NLP, become excellent part of it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. At least he tries to keep himself in shape. At least he tries to have functional relationships. At least he's made money. Do you know what I mean? Like, at least he works on himself. And I appreciate that. Do you know what I mean? I'm going, yeah, at least you took that part of what I believe was a dominant part of NLP. You know what I mean? Like, find people who are excellent at doing certain things and model that out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unlike what a lot of NLPers do, which is find a guru and try and become the guru, which is the last thing you want to do. Is about modeling
in a
skill.
Scaringly.
Yeah. You know,
manner, yeah.
They forget that it's about modeling out an individual's skill, not the person. Do you know what I mean? But I'm like, and whenever I say things like this, like I was saying, the NLP Superfest, you know, I basically went on stage in front of 500 people and just said it. You know what I mean? I just was blunt. But they always had a problem because there was a guy on stage and he was meant to stick people's hands to everything. He couldn't do it. Another person was meant to do other things and he couldn't do it. So the organizers came up to me and said, listen, Al, you've got to save this. This is going down bad. This is on the first day, yeah? And I was the guy after lunch and they said, you've got to save us, man. You've got to save us.
Are you telling me that at an NLP event, there was somebody who was supposed to be, for example, locking people's hands to tables, this, that, the other, and with an audience full of fucking people who spent money on NLP courses, who were the easiest brainwash footwits on the planet, they couldn't get them to lock their hands to a table. That's bad.
Well, I believe the excuse was he didn't get round to it. That's not what it looked like to me. But anyway, there was a number of failures along the line, and I'm like, oh shit, okay. And so I said, okay, I'm going to make a deal with you. If you want me to turn this around, I will unapologetically be me. Yeah, because I know you said in my waiver, no swearing, no this, no that. I said, you've got to re-sign that. I can do whatever the fuck I want. Yeah? And they went, yeah, no problems. So I went on stage and just ruled, and I stuck like 350 people's hands to the table. I was like, I'm not going to do one. I'll do all of you. Do you know what I mean?
Nice.
And then, you know, and did all the stuff and everyone loved it. And that's where I met Frank and we did all these things. But here's the funny thing. At the end of it, I was voted the best speaker of the thing, but they didn't want to acknowledge this, that when who ran it come up and we were voted, but we got a problem. I said, what's the problem? They said, well, the NLP Association basically wants your fucking head. They want you basically kicked out of the NLP associations. And I said, why? Because of the way you communicated, your swearing, the way that you did things. And I'm like, all right.
They have the cheek to say that. ANLP, which when you say it quick, anal P.
Anal P, yeah. They went online to the community. And this is where I will be thankful to the NLP community of Australia. So if you're listening, NLP community of Australia, thank you very much. They all absolutely took my side. They all said, no, what, a legend, what are you on about? You know what I mean? Like, ridiculous. And so they kind of backed off. But yeah, I was like, wow, for a group where, you know, one of the founding principles, isn't it, is the meaning of communication is in the response you get. Yeah. And it would appear that I got a great response. You know what I mean? Like, what's your problem? You know? What? Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done in the NLP field to bring it back up. I'm not saying that NLP doesn't have excellence in it, but the people doing NLP need to hold themselves to a much higher standard. I really do believe that. You know, NLP is great and everyone knows they can do cool stuff with language and all the patterns and all that. Yeah, whatever. Nice. I'm only interested in seeing NLPers who themselves have become legends. You know what I mean? Like, come on, let's see some cool people.
That's one of the big, well, my biggest gripe with it all, and it's not just NLP, it's also hypnotherapy, well, loads of other modalities as well, frankly. If you've got the cash available or you can borrow the money, you go and do the practitioner course. You can literally walk out the day after your practitioner course and the next day, depending on the scheduling, do your master practitioner. And then you can literally walk out and the next day, if the scheduling was right, do your advanced master prac. And then you can walk out and do your trainer. Then you can walk out at the end, the next day, set up teaching other people and taking them through the multi-level marketing pyramid funnel of NLP or hypnotherapy training, teaching other people something you've learned off other people who've never really achieved anything in the real world unless you've gone to the real sources. But generally speaking, the majority of people teaching it have never done anything in the real world other than go through the courses, then go out and start teaching other people. It's the blind leading the fucking blind. Sorry, I went off.
No, mate, I think you should carry on.
But it is, look, it's tantamount fraud. Surely you should be going out there and actually getting fucking results with clients for, I don't know. I would recommend, say, either 10 years at least, or if you're really good at marketing and end up seeing in the realms of 20 to 40 clients a week, then maybe 5 years would bring you to a level where credibly you could ethically be saying, I've got some, I can teach you from experience. Not, I'm just regurgitating the textbook I learned from someone else who, the industry is fucked in that regard.
I'll meet you in the middle. I promised myself that I would not teach a thing until I'd done 7 years.
Okay.
So I did 7 years, and I think I was seeing more people than pretty much anywhere else in the fucking world at the time. I mean, just seeing a lot of people, and I was seeing, yeah, and people from everywhere, like, you know, like sports and business and this, doing TV shows. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like you. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff before I taught. But here's something that not a lot of people know, but I love saying it because it really winds the associations up. I didn't want to be beholden to any of the lineages. Yeah, I didn't want to train and be a trainer under Bandler or under Tad James or Grinder. I was like, I don't want to be, I'm not interested in any of your traditions. I'm not interested. I respect you all, you know, who have done it. And I always, you know, if anyone who ever trains me will absolutely say, I am unbelievably pedantic with paying back where each pattern, each idea came from. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, this is Conor Andreas, this is Steve, this is Dilts, this is Grinder, this is Band. You know what I mean? Like, I absolutely do my utmost to honor everything. But I was like, I'm not being any of your little bitches. So I just did some shitty dude. I can't remember his name. You know what I mean? Trainers training from America. You know what I mean? It was relatively useless. Do you know what I mean? Because I was like, exactly what you said. I was seeing all these other trainers just going through, you know, Tad James's kind of Insta trainer. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? System. Do you know what I mean? Like, from 0 to hero in a fucking month or whatever. You know what I mean? I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. Band, I didn't want to be beholden to him. Do you know what I mean? Grinder's approach, I was never a mad fan of. I mean, I get it, but, you know, new code NLP, I mean, it never really turned out anyone who was doing anything particularly useful. Do you know what I mean? Like, really? But I mean, Grinder's a legend, no doubt about it. But let's be honest, new code, kind of whatever. You know what I mean? I just wasn't seeing anyone that I wanted to emulate. Do you know what I mean? I was like, none of these trainers are people I want to emulate. You know what I mean? And your skill, it's okay. But I'm pretty convinced my skill through 7 years, you know, shits over most of your skills, unless you're extraordinarily good. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's why it was kind of really lovely to have met Frank, you know, the third co-creator. And he said he's I'm probably one of the best trainers ever seen. Do you know what I mean? When he saw me at NLP Superfest, and to get that acknowledgement, you know what I mean, was
cool,
appreciated. But it was very lovely after all of these years and kind of being the black sheep of the community, you know what I mean, to have one of the genuine co-creators become a friend. Do you know what I mean? And a colleague. And you know, that's been a very lovely rounding off of my NLP career, because I've always felt at odds with the world. I've always paid absolute respect, you know what I mean, to what happened in the 70s, you know, and then from about 76, 78 onwards, I think NLP, whatever. I think those first few years, genius, and then yeah, sure, you know, not so sure. So it's been a lovely journey from the NLP, you know, to have had that, because before I met Frank and had that acknowledgement, I didn't care what the community felt, but I didn't really have a mirror against which to have a sense of kind of how far I'd come. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Wow.
Funny, huh?
It's been amazing. I'm going to have to bring this to a close in a minute, much longer than we normally are. But I tell you what, viewers and listeners, pure gold. As I always say, watch or listen again, but this time take notes, because there are nuggets all along the way. Just as there's further nuggets you can find out by going to the links that will be below this video or below the speaker symbol on all the major podcast platforms. Go and visit those links, find out more about the Hummingbird Method, Alchemy of Mind, the 4 domains, and all the other cool stuff that Alistair has got that could help take you to the next level. Now, I always end every show with the same question, so we're going to end with that question in a minute. But before I ask that final question, there is one thing left on the notes, and that is to find out what it is that made you laugh, that makes other people laugh, something from one of my DVD sets.
Okay, so I tell the story like this.
Okay.
I say, because I learned some really good stage hypnosis stuff from you. Yeah.
Oh,
so
cheers.
thank you for that. Yeah, really appreciate it. You know, I was kind of modeling out stage hypnotists, and you're one of the guys I modeled out. So just so you know. All right. So I do appreciate that a lot. And I tell the story like this. I say, basically, I was teaching one of my first NLP courses, and I had just watched your DVD. And in your DVD, you've got a group of people up in Northern England, and you're teaching a lot of kind of stage hypnotists and stuff. And it kind of looks pretty funny. It looks like at the back of a pub, a lot of big audience, yeah? And right off the bat, you say you got any volunteers. And one guy from the back kind of comes down to the front and sits down. And this is the absolute beginning of the DVD, yeah? And he just sits down. You hypnotize him and tell him that when he wakes up, his testicles are going to be talking, yeah? So he wakes up and his testicles are talking. At this point, when I'm watching the DVD, I'm crying with laughter, yeah? I'm in bits. But then when he takes his jumper off to try and keep the sound down, yeah, and smothers them with the jumper, I've lost the plot. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, like absolutely in bits, okay? So that's the bit I watched on the DVD. Anyway, I thought, fuck, I'm going to do this on the course, yeah? Anyway, I'm mucking around. There's a small group, about 13, 14, and they're a legendary bunch. I still know some of them. One of my first ever trainings. I still know some of them from back then. There's one guy, Mark. Mark, if you're listening, you know who it is. And we're doing all this kind of stuff, and I'm making them lose numbers and doing kind of shit, you know what I mean? And I had already told them about this story at the beginning, yeah? And everyone was falling out with this laughter. So right at the end, I go, right, come on, Mark, hypnotize you for the last time. Yeah, so I'm hypnotizing him and all this kind of stuff. And then I go, right. And everyone knows what's coming, yeah? Because I say, when you open your eyes, your testicles are going to be talking. In fact, they're going to be singing, yeah? And he goes, no, No, they fucking won't.
Oh,
Deliberately not letting himself because he knew what I was up to.
oh dear.
Yeah, it was one of the funnest things. So between your DVD and his response, was brilliant. So thanks for that.
And no, and there's a key lesson of stage hypnosis in what Alistair just said. Things work far better when people, the person you're going to get to do it doesn't know in advance what's happening, because then they can't resist as easily. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Right. So the question I ask everyone at the end, and the 120, is literally just to open up the floor to you. Although you've shared so much pure gold with us over the past shitting hell. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Time just, I mean, that's just been fun, pure gold. I know, I end with the question, what would you kind of key piece of advice be to viewers or listeners who want to, who might be just starting out on their journey and want to be the best possible therapist that they can become?
Well, I think that's a big question. I'm going to try and be very concise. So I think if you want to get really good at just helping people, then really look at the work of David Grove and Clean Language, because at least it will clean up what you do. It'll just literally clean up what you do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go to the source. Don't go to some of the people who he kind of trained and stuff, because they're not as clean as they think they are. Do you know what I mean? But the original work of David Grove, phenomenal. Obviously, if you want to do stage hypnosis, do what I do. Model out Alex, Jonathan Royale. You know what I mean? That's what I did. You know what I mean? And you really helped me. I genuinely learned how to do some really cool stage stuff from you. You know what I mean? And saw all the no nonsense behind the scenes stuff, which was, very useful. I think as an individual, I think it goes back to what we talked about, mate. I think you really have to look honestly at this submissive, dominant, mechanism within our psyche. And I think you really have to, if you want to be a free man or a free woman, you know what I mean, and to the best of your ability, it takes effort, and it takes effort to look at where you are, just have been programmed with traditions or family or society or politics in non-useful ways, really look at it. And how everyone talks about trying to become conscious by meditating. Yeah, you don't become conscious by meditating, that I can promise you. Yeah, you become conscious by knowledge. Yeah, I mean, and that's another discussion for another day, but you become conscious. You become, I'm tired now, it's getting late here. It's a new word, conscious. You become conscious through knowledge. Yeah, through knowledge acquisition. Yeah, not even through experience, because there are plenty of people who experience their entire life and never learn much. They never become particularly conscious. They just eat, watch TV, and repeat the patterns that have been programmed into them. That's not being a conscious individual. To become a conscious individual is to investigate the programming that you have taken on board, and then to actively decide, the programming that you want to install an action, and to become extraordinary. And as I always say, to help others become extraordinary, because this is the final thing I'll say, I was always very fond of the Silver Method. I always thought that out of all of the kind of slightly new agey, hypno-y, mystical, things, I always thought the Silver Method was the best of the lot, and Jose Silva. And I read basically his autobiography, I think it was, and he said something that really landed with me many, many years ago. It would have been 20, 25 years ago I read this. And he said, in life, if you only look out for yourself, the universe, or whatever you believe in, will only give you enough energy and power to do that. If you want to look out and after your family, then you'll be given more energy and power to accomplish that. But if you want to have the most power and vitality running through you, then you quite simply need to look out for and help as many people as you possibly can. And I've always felt that had a poetry to it, a beauty to it. Do you know what I mean? Not at the expense of yourself. You should always look after yourself first, and become as, consciously powerful as you possibly can, And by power, I mean dominant, not submissive to programming, and then help as many people as you possibly can. You know, it's a little bit like truly becoming a Neo, isn't it, in the Matrix?
Great films.
Yeah.
A lot closer to reality than many would like to perhaps believe or accept.
Yeah. But thanks so much for your generosity. You know,
thank you for your time so much, and more importantly for sharing what. Hey, I've got a ton out of it, so I'm sure that viewers and listeners will as well. Yeah, everyone, I say it one more time, go to the links below the video or the speaker symbol, go and visit the websites, look up things, especially the Hummingbird method looks like it's going to be an absolute awesome addition to your toolkit, whether it's for yourself or for helping your clients. Indeed, both of those things. Thank you so much to the legend that is, formerly known as the Life Guru, Alistair, formerly known as a Sound Purpose, now the founder and creator of the Hummingbird Method, Mr. Alistair Horscroft. Thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thanks, Alex. Take care, my man. All the best. Thank you.